All right, we are live. Welcome everybody to Standing for Truth. I am your host, Donny.
And I'm your host, Matt.
Tonight is the Age of the Earth Christmas special. We are blessed to have Dr. Kent Hovind here with us for this awesome show. Brother Matt Powell is on vacation. So Matt, if you're in the chat, God bless you. Now, for this awesome show, we are going to be focusing on primarily the age of the earth. And since Christmas is just a couple days away, we are going to answer important questions that are on everybody's mind, such as what did Adam buy Eve for Christmas? Did Noah have a Christmas tree on the ark during the Genesis flood? Very important question on everybody's mind. And most importantly, why did the Flintstones celebrate Christmas? All jokes aside, though, we will be demonstrating tonight that both scripture and science confirm a young earth. The evidence cannot be denied. Dr. Hovind, thank you so much for being here for this special.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here again.
Awesome. And Matt, any words of introduction? Thank you for being here as co-host. Words of introduction before we kind of get right into the topic and presentation.
Oh, no, I'm just excited to jump right into this. I'm sure everyone on your channel knows who I am, so I'm ready to go.
Yep.
But just make sure that that you tag Standing for Truth with your questions so that we can see them and collect them, and or myself, but I would say preferably Standing for Truth. We'll both see it that way.
I appreciate it. And actually, again, before we get into it, I want to thank Dr. Hovind. We've been doing this ministry now for 3 years, and Kent has been a huge blessing and so generous with his time. We've had him on now 30 times. We have a playlist titled Dr. Kent Hovind on Standing for Truth with debates, interviews, discussions, everything we've done with him. Kent, even 3 years ago when we had 50 subscribers and nobody knew who we are, we had no friends in the YouTube world, you were still willing to come on and do interviews and debates with us. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you.
Okay, well, here we go. Let's get right into it. We're going to start off with the age of the earth. We're going to hand it over to you, Dr. Hovind. Take as much time as you need, and then we'll do some questions.
Well, thank you, sir. My name's Kent Hovind. I was born and raised in East Peoria, Illinois. My dad and brother were engineers. My mother and other brother were teachers. And I got saved when I was 16 years old and started reading my Bible. And I had been taught that the earth is billions of years old. And I read my Bible, and it said Adam was 130 when Seth was born, and Seth was 105 when his son was born. And so along the years, I've made this graph and modified it many times. But Adam was 130, there we go, when Seth is born. And then it says he lived 800 years after that. Of course, my first question as a new Christian, how can a man live to be 900? But regardless, if you add up the dates that are found in Genesis chapter 5, and again in chapter 11, it takes up after the flood of Noah, you can make a chart like this, or we sell them in our bookstore on drdino.com. But the Bible dates add up to about 6,000 years for the whole earth, for the whole universe. It says in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And Jesus said in Matthew 19:4, have you not read? Is that up on screen there, Steve? Jesus said, have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? So here's Jesus claiming the creation of Adam and Eve was the beginning. Said it again in Mark 10:6. From the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. So Satan has always wanted to change God's creation and twist it and pervert it for his own, whatever he's doing, okay? He changed the glory of the uncorruptible God. And the Bible says God gave them up to uncleanness. There are people who do not want to believe in God. They don't want to believe the Bible. The Bible dates clearly add up to about 6,000. And this issue of the age of the earth, and ultimately the age of everything else, is critical because if you take away time, the atheist argument for evolution falls completely apart. In their mind, and only in their mind, time can do anything. We see 339 breeds of dogs now that are available to buy. And in their mind, that means, look at the varieties of dogs we have. That means the dogs and mosquitoes are related if we go back far enough. If you give us enough time, Time is their God. That's their pacifier, keeps them from crying. So they don't understand or don't want to admit that this issue, the age of the earth, is central to the whole creation evolution argument. And if you take away time, their whole argument collapses in a heap. The Bible says they changed the truth of God into a lie and worshiped and served the Creator, so God gave them up. You can read all of Romans chapter 1 about what happened here if you'd like. But the Bible dates clearly add up to 6,000. Let me get past all this here. The Bible said in 2 Timothy, Paul was warning Timothy, his young preacher boy, Timothy, the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. Sound meaning solid, and doctrine meaning teaching. But after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers, having itching ears. They bring teachers in, they heap to themselves teachers who tell them, here, tell me what I want to hear. Tell me there's no God. Please tell me the earth is billions of years old. Please tell me God's rules don't apply. Please tell me the 10 Commandments are fake. They heap to themselves teachers who will teach that stuff, having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned unto fables. Evolution is the biggest fable ever taught, and much bigger than any of Aesop's fables. It's ridiculous. Evolution is the dumbest and most dangerous religion in the world. So Jesus said the creation of Adam was the beginning. The Bible dates add up to about 6,000. In Romans chapter 5 and 1 Corinthians chapter 15, nothing died until man sinned. This is such a fundamental question. Did man bring death into the world? Or did death bring man into the world? These two views are polar opposite. You cannot try to blend creation and evolution. You cannot try to blend billions of years with the Bible. It's not going to fit. Clearly, the Bible dates add up to 6,000. And then about 4,400 years ago, there was a big flood that destroyed the world. And I've got all kinds of charts and pictures I use on that, but the flood explains all the geology. The students are taught in school that the layers of the earth are different ages. Absolute insanity, baloney. They say the top layer is younger. Well, where did it come from? Outer space? How can any layer of earth be a different age than any other layer? Whether it's 6,000 or 6 trillion, every speck of dirt's the same age. But yet they got this crazy idea that the layers are different ages. So the people are turned away from the truth unto these fables. They'll say during the Jurassic period, there's no such thing as a Jurassic period. None. Everything lived at the same time. God made everything in 6 days. So as I was reading my Bible as a new Christian, going to an independent, temperamental, fundamental, right-wing, radical, chicken-eating Baptist church, reading my Schofield reference Bible, and listening to what I was learning in school, I said, wait a minute, somebody is wrong. Somebody's lying. I'm being taught in school the earth is billions of years old and dinosaurs died before man got here. I'm being taught in my Bible the earth is 6,000 years old and nothing died till Adam sinned. Somebody's wrong. Now I'm going to find out who it is. It's been a lifelong study, 53 years for me now, to study that topic. Is that Bible correct? And I've come to the totally unbiased conclusion that it is 100% accurate just as written. God preserved his word. I believe in the King James Bible, to be more specific, but it's perfect. In the beginning, God created the heaven, singular, in the King James. All the New Bible versions say heavens, plural. They are wrong. It was God created the heaven, singular, and the earth. Then the thing above the earth we call heaven, he divided up into 3 slices later in Genesis. First heaven, second heaven, third heaven. But God made the earth outstanding in the water and out of the water. The Bible says in 2 Peter, 2 Peter 3, the scoffers in the last days will be willingly ignorant, dumb on purpose, willingly ignorant of how God made the heavens and how the earth was in the water and out of the water. So we cover all that in my video series number 2, seminar part 2, about what was the earth like? Why did they live to be 900? My videotape number 1, or DVD number 1, is all about the age of the earth. Scripturally, it's absolutely could not be more clear. The earth is about 6,000 years old. So then you go look at the scientific evidence. What does science say? Well, when you see things, for instance, the earth, I got a model here. The earth is spinning, it's turning around, but the earth is slowing down. Okay. Well, if the Earth is slowing down 1,000th of a second every day, you can Google once every, I forget how many years, 4 years, I think, they have leap second. Most people have heard of leap year, but they have a leap second because they have to add a second to the clock because of the slowing spin of the Earth, and the clocks are going off. So if the Earth is slowing down, well, that means it used to be going faster. Like, duh. If you speed up the Earth, if you could go back in time, which we can't, but if you could go back in time and speed up the Earth 1,000th of a second every day, at some point back there, you're going to have the Earth spinning really fast, causing enormous problems. It's going to squish the Earth out like a Frisbee, going to fling everything off into space. There's no possible any life could be on Earth, even a few billion years ago, just because of the spin of the Earth. When you look at astronomy and say, wow, the sun is burning up its fuel source. It's burning 5 million tons a second. Well, if you go back in time, then it used to be heavier. You start adding 5 million tons a second going back in time, at some point you reach a big problem where the sun's gravity starts pulling everything in. Gravity would be stronger. Then say, well, it can't be billions. You see, the moon is going around the Earth, but the moon's getting further away, losing the moon about 1.5 inches a year. Okay, well, that means it used to be closer. I go through about 30 or 40 scientific indicators on my DVD number 1, The Age of the Earth, how to prove the Earth is not billions of years old. But see, if the Earth is indeed not billions of years old, then it wouldn't matter any of the theories you have. There's not enough time for a frog to turn to a prince. See, in a fairy tale, you kiss the frog, it turns to a prince. In the science book, you wait billions of years and the frog turns to the prince. It's the same fairy tale with a different magic ingredient. Instead of a kiss, it's time. Give it billions of years, it'll turn to a prince. So one of the things we emphasize here at our Dinosaur Adventureland in Lenox, Alabama, the Christian museum we're building in Science Center, is the accuracy of the Bible. The Bible dates clearly add up to 6,000. There's lots of scientific indicators. It can't be billions. So I think the Bible's true. And when you take away that pacifier from the atheists, they absolutely go berserk. They have to have billions of years. It's true. We see variations within every kind of animal. There's 195 different varieties of chickens, mostly bred by man for a particular purpose. Give more eggs, more meat, whatever, okay? Dumber than all get out. And most of them wouldn't survive in the wild. You turn all the varieties of chickens loose in the woods, only a few kinds would survive. So they've been bred by man to produce a particular quality that they want. It's true, you can have varieties of chickens, but they're still chicken. No exceptions. Same thing with any kind of animal. God said they bring forth after their kind, not variety, not species, kind. That's mentioned 20 times in the first 7 chapters of the Bible. They will bring forth after their kind. Or Noah brought them onto the ark after their kind, after their sort. Probably had about 8,000 kinds of animals on the ark. There's a baraminology.com website. Baramin is the Hebrew word for kind. So they did a baraminology.com website. They say probably 8,000 kinds of animals on the ark. He didn't have to bring fish. Of course, they got plenty of water outside. Didn't have to bring insects because they don't have nostrils. God told Noah to bring those in whose nostrils was the breath of life on dry land. So the flood explains the geology. It explains the Grand Canyon, probably formed 50 years after the flood while the layers were still soft underneath a few hundred feet of hardened rock. And so once you cut a channel through the hard rock, it's the soft stuff, then it rose like crazy. Grand Canyon probably formed in a week. We cover all that on our video number 6 about the geology of the earth and the stratification, all that stuff. So I just defend the position, the Bible is true. But if the Bible's true about the creation and the flood, maybe it's true about the coming judgment. 2 Peter 3 said the scoffers in the last days will be willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood and the coming judgment. There was a Russian atheist astronomer who said one time, folks, either there is a God or there isn't. Both possibilities are frightening. If there's a God, we better find out who he is and what he wants and do what he says, because this is his world. If there's no God, we're in trouble. We're going around the sun at 66,000 miles an hour and nobody's driving. I think this is a critical topic, and I appreciate you guys in your channel standing for this. I don't want to take all evening, take time for questions and stuff, but I stand by the position and will defend it in a debate against anybody you've got, that the earth is 6,000 years old, not billions, and the flood can explain nearly all the geology we see, and God's word is scientifically accurate. So Christmas, of course, we know Christmas is a pagan holiday from the December 25th, used to be the shortest day of the year when the earth is tilted far away from the sun. Now it's December 21st or 2nd. Anyway, we just passed it. There's a long, complicated reason why. But anyway, Jesus was born, and this is the day we celebrate Jesus' birth now. So I think if you've not asked Jesus Christ to come into your heart and be your Savior, that's why he came and died on the cross, you know. He wants to come, he wants to forgive your sin. But the wages of sin is death. Somebody's got to pay those wages. Either you're going to pay it by dying and going to hell, or you're going to accept his payment. So 53 years ago, I said, Lord, I'm a sinner. I'd like to accept your payment for my sin. Would you please come in my heart and save me? And he forgave me and moved in. Started making a whole new person out of me. So he wants to do the same for you. Christmas would be the ideal time for your listeners to say, you know, I'm going to give myself to the Lord as a Christmas present. Jesus, you can have me. The Bible says, whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. You just simply call and ask him and he'll save you. Call our office if you want to talk to me about that, 855-BIG-DINO, extension 3. I take calls all day long. Be glad to lead you to the phone lead you to the Lord over the phone. If you'd like to come, give me a call. Okay. Donny, thank you so much. Go ahead with the next question or something like that. But the Bible says 6,000. Science teaches about 6,000, the real scientific evidence. So they're lying when they say billions. Go ahead.
I appreciate that, Dr. Hovind. Great presentation, tons of good points, and I always appreciate the visuals. Amen. Whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. Best time to get saved, guys. If you're a critic in the chat, it's time to believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and thou shalt be saved. So well said, Kent. One question that comes to my mind, and then we'll get into some audience questions because we've got a great audience and questions are flying in. So we're going to be busy all night. Mark 10:6, as you frequently point to, Brother Kent. But from the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. Now, you've done a ton of debates with old earth creationists and theistic evolutionists, and they'll say, well, you know, this is just the beginning of the creation of man. So you've got the beginning of the creation of man, but then billions of years of earth and cosmic history prior to man. What are your thoughts on that? What's a good way to rebut that?
Well, if I've debated Hugh Ross, the astronomer who says the earth is billions of years old, and God used evolution to get us here, sort of. That is so contrary to many other scriptures. For example, was there death before sin? When God made the world, were the lions eating the zebras, and God looked at that and said, that's very good. I'm glad that lion got that baby zebra and dragged him off and tore him apart. No. The Bible says clearly that all the animals ate plants. Everything was vegetarian in the original creation. It wasn't until after the flood when God said, Noah, now you can eat meat. Read Genesis chapter 9. So when God said it was very good, it was very good. So I ask guys like Hugh Ross, when God said it's very good at the end of Genesis chapter 1, was there death going on? And he has to say yes. If you say, well, if you believe the earth is billions of years old and you believe the Bible, did dinosaurs live before man? The Bible says nothing died till Adam sinned. So the death before sin is a major stumbling block for these guys who believe that. And again, you know, Matthew 19:4 and Mark 10:6 both say that the creation of Adam was the beginning. It doesn't say the beginning of man. It says the beginning. So they're adding to the word of God, a dangerous thing to do, according to Exodus. So I have to strongly disagree. There's no reason to. We don't need more time. You can fit it all in 6,000 years. 6,000 is a long time. It's hard to think about Columbus 500 years ago trying to find this place. That's 500. 6,000 is a long time. So plenty of time. Okay.
Amen. Well said. Well said. I like the way you pointed out frequently, Kent, that time is like the pacifier for the evolutionists. You remove time and they're going to cry like a baby. And here's the thing. Time is not the hero of the story. Right? The evolutionist thinks time is not the hero of the story. You can give them 1 trillion years and you're still never going to take a single-celled like ancestor into a whale. Now, Dr. Hovind, you debated a compromiser named Inspiring Philosophy, and he makes the argument that in Genesis it says, and God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it. So he's saying, and a lot of these compromisers, old earthers will say, well, because it says subdue, that's harsh language. And therefore, there must have been death and war and conquest before the fall. What are your thoughts on that? What would be a good response to that? Oh, I think your audio went out, Dr. Hovind.
Okay.
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Okay. He said, that's reading an awful lot into the text. That's ridiculous. Replenish the earth and subdue it. Get it under control. I would say that means, Adam, here's your beautiful world. Plant the flowers the way you would like them. Plant the trees the way you would like them. Control your environment. I've given you all these beautiful flowers and plants. Put them where you want them. Tell my wife, hey, get control of that kitchen. How do you want it? How do you want it organized? Doesn't mean it's been destroyed. Just does it suit your fancy? Are the dishes in the right cabinet? Are the spoons in the right drawer? So I think that's absolutely ludicrous, because especially when you go by all the other scriptures. See, no prophecy of the scriptures of any private interpretation. It says in 1 Peter chapter 1, I think. But all scripture must be taken together. So when you look at all the other scriptures, in the 10 Commandments, God wrote it on a rock with his finger. He said, I want you to honor the Sabbath because in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is. So why were the Jews supposed to keep the Sabbath? To remember the 6-day creation, when he made heaven, earth, sea, and everything in them. I can't think of anything that's not in those 3 things. Heaven, earth, and sea. It's got everything. So there's the Exodus 20 and Exodus 31 again, and several other times, it repeats these 10 commandments, and it says, in 6 days, the Lord made them all. So that teaching from Inspiring Philosophy on these compromisers is so contrary to many scriptures. I have to completely disagree. They're wrong. Okay?
Amen. Well said. Well said, Kent. Brother Matt, anything you wanted to add? And then I'll let you kind of pick the next question and take us from here.
Sure. I guess Inspiring Philosophy saying that it has a notion of domination or control or violence or something like that. I would go, well, okay, I guess the most violent thing we would do is make an ox till the land, right? We would dominate it. We would tell it what to do. We would force it against its will to do what we will. But it's not, evil. We use animals all the time. We ride a horse. I don't think the horse wants us to, but it doesn't really matter. So I think he's looking too much into it, saying that, no, it means they were killing each other and we're supposed to kill them. And it doesn't make any sense. That's all.
No. And I mean, doesn't a farmer subdue his land and make sure that the plants are not growing out of control and things like that? So, I mean, Dr. Hovind, you nailed it there when you said that they're reading too much into the text. So, Matt, go ahead. Choose the next question, brother.
Well, it kind of got answered earlier, but one was, why haven't ancient weapons like arrowheads or spears been found with the remains of dinosaurs if they existed together? Kent already said that humans weren't killing and eating animals until the flood. So I kind of answered it already, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, ancient weapons to do what? If everything was vegetarian before the flood and all the animals were friendly, including all the dinosaurs, weapons for what? It wasn't until after the flood. Let's assume for the minute that the flood created nearly all the fossils in the world in 1 year. The flood caused the fossils. So it wouldn't be till after the flood that we would have this, violence breaking out. Of course, there were people were evil before the flood. There may have been some people killing each other, I don't know. But why would you find weapons with dinosaurs? I think there's plenty of evidence that dinosaurs and man have lived together. Certainly the scripture would teach that. And I cover on video number 3 of my series for 2 hours all the evidence of dinosaurs living with man. And some might still be alive. There have been thousands of sightings of creatures like Loch Ness Monster, Lake Champlain Monster, Mokele Mbembe in the Congo swamp. So I cover all that on video number 3. So I think dinosaurs probably were killed off after the flood, either by the climate change because they couldn't live as long anymore, Before the flood, people lived to be 900. After the flood, only 400, then 200, then 100. So something had happened to reduce lifespans in general. Some of the bigger dinosaurs might not have lived long enough to even reach reproductive age. So the whole species would go extinct just because they can't live long enough. I mean, if everybody today in the world died at age 12, you wouldn't have very many babies. So, yeah, but I think also man hunted them either for meat or because they were a menace. Called them dragons or something like that, some other name. So I guess I don't see a problem there. It all fits right in with the biblical account of creation. Why would you not find weapons? I think there's evidence. They've never found human and chicken footprints in the same rock strata. That proves humans and chickens did not live together. We got them in our yard over here. What do you mean they didn't live together? Yeah, they did. Okay, go ahead. Next question.
How much of the Earth was covered in ice from the after the flood, and for how long?
Well, it would be a guess on anybody's part. We know that ice, because when ice pushes across the landscape, it acts like a bulldozer and piles up stuff in front of it. And when it finally stops pushing, and then it melts back, well, the stuff stays there that it bulldozed up. So that's called a terminal, meaning the end, a terminal moraine. It's a hill, a bump. There are moraines all over the world. The terminal moraines in Missouri, and I think is about as far south as it got. So the ice age, I think everybody agrees, came down as far as Kansas City, Missouri. Get America here. So today the ice caps are way back here. Ice went pushing out. Oh, get over where you can see it. There we go. Ice did go pushing out all the way down to Kansas City, which has now melted back. On the sides, it leaves what's called a lateral moraine, with pushing the stuff out of the way, terminal moraine and lateral moraine. So I think the ice caps were ginormous during the flood and after the flood, and it would take 200 years to melt back to where it is today. During that 200-year period, as it melted back, it would raise the ocean level. And that's why the oceans have two very distinct features called the deep part, the abyss, and the shallow part called the continental shelf. And I cover that in video number 6 about the, apologize, I've been talking a lot today. While the continental shelf was all exposed for the first 200 years, let's say, after the flood, you could walk anywhere in the world. You could walk to Australia. Take a look at the depth of the water between Australia and Vietnam. There's an underwater natural land bridge right in there. All the Philippine Islands. I mean, the water is generally 30, 40, 50 feet deep all over there, from here to the back of the building. So if you lowered the oceans 200 feet, freeze all that, stick it on the North Poles, make bigger ice caps, well then for the few hundred years after the flood, the animals could migrate anywhere they wanted. You could walk to Australia. Between Russia and the United States, the Bering Sea up there, 50, 60 feet deep. Actually, at the edge, it's 0. When it comes up to the edge, but yeah, about 50, 60 feet. So I think the ice age explains why all the animals were able to migrate where they wanted, and some ended up getting trapped on that island or that continent by the rising water levels from the ice melting back. I got plenty of pictures on that, but I can't keep up with the pictures and the questions. Go ahead.
I appreciate that answer, Dr. Hovind. So here's the next question that comes in from the chat, and he asks, can you guys talk about other methods that are used for dating? We do have a lot of questions pertaining to different methods of dating. I guess we'll deal with this one. He specifically asks about carbon-14. He says, why is carbon-14 particularly used when it's so obviously bad?
Well, carbon is a natural occurring element in the atmosphere, and carbon decays. Carbon, when it's struck by sunlight and radiation, carbon turns to carbon-14. And I got 194 billion slides on that topic. I'll try to call them up quickly. Radiation from the sun gets in, strikes the atmosphere, and produces carbon-14. Got it right here somewhere. Okay. It is a very unstable element. It does not want to be carbon-14. It wants to decay back. And when it starts to fall apart and decay back, you can hear little pieces fly off of it. A Geiger counter will pick up the clicks as it is decaying. So I've got pictures showing all this on seminar part 7, where I cover carbon dating in great detail. But if you're studying, trying to find the age of something based on a decay process, just common sense would say, now hold on, I got it right here. Redshift, starlight, how do we see the stars? Billions of light years away. Is the sun shrinking? Oh, here we go, carbon dating. Okay, slide number 519. Alt-DV, 519, enter. What about radiocarbon dating? I did a debate on that, my debate number 224, back in August of 2020. Carbon dating. You look older than your profile. I've been under a lot of pressure. both carbon, okay. Fossils are really dated by their position in the geologic column, which does not exist. That's another story. They say the top layer is younger. I say, where'd it come from? Here's an illustration that helps people get it right away. If you walked into a room and found a candle burning on a table, and I asked you the question, when was it lit? Nobody knows. We walked in, it was burning when we got there. This is an example of carbon. The carbon-14 is decaying. It's burning. It's falling apart, turning back to carbon-12. Okay? When did it start? That's what they really want to know. That's how they're wanting to use this for. Well, when was it lit? Let's do some empirical science. Things we can study, test, demonstrate, and measure. Let's measure the candle. So we measure the candle and find out it's 7 inches tall. We all agree. How tall is the candle? 7 inches, exactly. Yes, sir. Okay. When was it lit? I don't know. It's 7 inches tall now, though. Okay. Let's do some more science. Let's measure how fast it burns. We get our Olympic stopwatches and we measure to the nearest bazillionth of a second. We find out it's burning an inch an hour. We now have two scientific facts. It is 7 inches tall. It's burning an inch an hour. We all agree. When was it lit? You still can't tell me unless you make some assumptions. For example, how tall was it? We don't know. Has it always burned at the same rate? We don't know. So you can't know those things. You can test the amount of carbon-14 in an object, and you can test how fast it decays. I agree. Just like the candle. But when did it start? Well, how much was in it when it started? Has it been any contamination? Has it always decayed at the same rate? This guy said radiometric dating would not have been feasible if the geologic column had not been erected first. Fossils are really dated by where you find them. Bring a fossil, bring this petrified clam, closed position, by the way, into any university and say, how old is this clam? First question they ask is, where did you find it? I found it in my desk, sir. How old is it? They'll say, oh, we have to know which layer you found it in to date it by the geologic column. Fossils have been and still are the best and most accurate method of dating and correlating the rocks. So they date the rocks by the fossils, but they date the fossils by the rocks. Clear circular reasoning. So anyway, this guy said, I can think of no cases of radioactive decay being used to date fossils. This was 40 years ago. Nothing's changed, by the way. Earth's atmosphere is about 300 miles thick. Most of it's within 10 miles. So let's say most of Earth's atmosphere, 10 miles. It contains mostly nitrogen, some oxygen, a little tiny bit of carbon dioxide, and a real tiny little bit of radioactive carbon, 0.0000765%. Carbon combines with oxygen and makes CO2, which the plants breathe. They love it. That's what they live off of. Radiation is striking our atmosphere, producing carbon-14. Well, the oxygen latches onto it, whether it's carbon-12 or carbon-14, it don't care. It just wants a carbon molecule. And so the radiation, cosmic rays bombard the upper atmosphere, neutrons collide with the atmosphere, nitrogen atoms, and produce carbon-14. Okay. You can read all about this. They've known this for the guy who invented it, Willard Libby, here back in 1955, invented the carbon-14 process. About 21 pounds of carbon-14 is produced every year in the whole world. 21 pounds spread out over the whole planet, not much. Well, carbon and nitrogen are right next to each other on the periodic table. There they are right there. A Geiger counter is used to detect radioactive elements like carbon or uranium or potassium as it decays. Radioactive carbon is being produced in the atmosphere by the sun. It breaks down to nitrogen at the rate of half every 5,730 years. Okay, I agree. Well, the plants are breathing in CO2. They don't care whether it's radioactive or not. They're bringing in CO2. So the assumption would be that the amount of radioactive carbon in the atmosphere, the 0.0000765%, would be the same found in the plants. A reasonable assumption, but unprovable. Then animals come along and eat the plants. I agree. So you would assume that plants and animals have the same ratio as the atmosphere does. Sounds good. So the plants are taking it out of the air, the animals are eating the plants, and it gets into all the biosphere through this process. It's assumed the ratio in the atmosphere would be the same found in living plants and animals. Okay? Possibly, we don't know that that's true. When the animal or plant dies, it stops taking in any new C14. It's no longer breathing in the plant's case, or no longer eating in the animal's case. So they compare the amount in the atmosphere with the object being dated. Let's say it's got half as much in the fossil as it does in the air. They'd say, well, it's been dead for one half-life. And we know it takes 5,730 years for half of it to decay. Therefore, it's 5,730 years old. This is, in a nutshell, how it's done. Whatever C14 is in it continues to decay. So it can't get any more. It's not breathing anymore. So if it's got 0.000765, they say, oh, it's just recently dead. If it's got half of that, it's been dead for one half-life, 2 half-lives, 3 half-lives. With carbon dating, you could not possibly date more than about 15 or 20 or 30,000 years. It just, some people say, oh, we can go 50,000. Okay. I don't believe that, but let's give them 50,000. So it goes from a half to a fourth to an eighth to a 16th to not much to measure. Here's the decay rate. 16 clicks per minute on your Geiger counter, still alive. 5,700 years old, it's only got 8 clicks per minute. This is a rough analogy of how it works. And they're just testing how much carbon-14 is in this thing and trying to find an age based upon the amount of C14 that they can measure. Obvious, glaring assumptions here. How much was in it when it died? Did the atmosphere back then have the same amount as it does now? You can't know that. Has it always decayed at the same rate? Has there been any contamination? Let's see. Their short 5,700-year half-life, no atoms of C14 should exist in any carbon older than 250,000 years. Should all be gone. Yet it's proven impossible to find any natural source of carbon below the Pleistocene age that does not contain significant amounts of C14, even though such strata are supposed to be millions or billions of years old. Conventional carbon-14 laboratories are aware of this problem and are unable to account for it. I mean, we don't know. Lately, the world's best such laboratory learned how, in 2 decades, how to measure and not contaminate the samples. Even diamonds. ICR.org, Institute for Creation Research, has a lot of stuff on carbon dating. There's some obvious assumptions. If I told you I want you to fill a barrel with water, I give you the hose, here, fill the barrel. But I got holes drilled on the other side. As you're putting water in, it starts leaking out the hole. When it gets a little more full, it leaks out 2 holes. At some point, you're going to reach a stage called equilibrium. You'll never fill the barrel past that point because it's coming out as fast as it's going in. So they are assuming that C14 has reached equilibrium millions of years ago. Carbon dating and bomb carbon. One assumption is that global levels of C14 in the atmosphere has not changed. The other assumption is the corollary. Biosphere has the same overall concentration of radiocarbon as the atmosphere. You can't know either of those. Anyway, so I go through probably 45 minutes worth answering that question about carbon dating. Freshwater reservoir, there's so much involved here. It is based on just very obvious assumptions. Carbon dating, a closer look at its many flaws. There's an article, 2 years ago. Radioactive cosmic rays change the Earth's atmosphere, irregularity in carbon-14. I've got a ton of stuff, and you can get all my slides on a thumb drive for $100, all 45,000 of them that I use in my presentations. So I don't want to spend all the time on carbon dating, but if somebody tells you we know the Earth is billions of years old because of any dating technique of a decaying element, rubidium, strontium, lead-208, lead-206, they do not understand what they're talking about, okay? It's been calculated it would take 30,000 years for the Earth's atmosphere to reach equilibrium. If we took a brand new planet, put air around it, got it going around the sun, the radiation is producing C14 Decay is taking it out. This is filling the barrel with water. How long would it take to reach equilibrium? They said 30,000 years. Okay? Then they come along and say, well, we know the Earth is millions of years old, so we can ignore the equilibrium problem. Oh, no, you can't. You know, the Earth has still not reached equilibrium. Radiocarbon is forming 28 to 37% faster than it's decaying. Well, if we still haven't reached equilibrium, it's less than 30,000 years old. Yeah, I could have told them that. There's plenty of articles on that stuff. So anyway, that's enough on that topic. Go ahead.
I appreciate it, Dr. Hovind. 45,000 slides. I don't know how you find the specific slides so quickly. I love it. I always appreciate the visuals. One thing I'll say to that, Dr. Hovind, is I find it so funny when these critics and proponents of deep time evolution want to bring up these dating methods, because if the Earth really were billions of years old, all the C14, as you're pointing out, should be gone, and yet we consistently find and get thousands of years for dinosaur fossils, diamonds, coal, and other samples. I mean, how can that be? It can't be if the Earth's billions of years old.
Right, I agree.
Matt, any comments you wanted to make or add before we get to this next question?
Oh no, let's just jump right into it. There's so many questions still. It's insane.
Okay, go ahead, Brother Matt. I'll let you do the honors. Whatever one you want out of that massive list.
Okay. For Kit, what would you tell the scoffer that says bacteria mutations prove evolution?
Bacteria certainly mutate. The DNA code in a bacteria is more complex than the space shuttle. But it's always and only and ever still a bacteria. Nobody's ever seen a bacteria produce a non-bacteria, ever. Now, if you wish to believe and imagine, SpongeBob style, just imagine if we gave it billions of years, this would turn to an elephant. Okay, you can imagine all you want, but all that anybody's ever seen, from any mutation, whether it's bacteria or anything else, it's still a bacteria. Nothing else ever. It's certainly never going to become 2-celled or 3-celled or 4-celled. So they're dreaming that the mutation, which is a mistake in the gene code, would make a positive change. Nobody's ever seen a positive mutation. Mutations are harmful or fatal or neutral. They don't do anything. And if you could find a beneficial mutation, who would it marry? Don't they got to be of the same location and find each other at the same time in history? I mean, they're absolutely dreaming. I think nightmare might be a better word, that this process is going to change to something else. It's not science. It's a religious belief. And they're welcome to it. But they should admit it's a religion, and they should stop teaching it in the school system to all the kids, because it sure ain't science.
Amen. Amen. Well said. The chat is wild. It's very lively. And here's a super chat question. Just glancing over it, it looks like it's an objection, actually. I'll put it up on screen so we can all have a look at it and read it. This one comes in from Walter Robertson. I appreciate the question. And the super chat, he asks, in Genesis 1:26 and 27, male and female were created. Verse 31, the sixth day. Are you really going to believe that all the events between Adam and Eve were done in a 24-hour period? Genesis 2:7-23 all happen in 24 hours? Question mark. How are all these things done in such a short amount of time?
Okay, excellent question. On my video 7, I cover are there supposed contradictions in the Bible. One of the contradictions the atheists love to point out is Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2. Let me get this in slide number, I'm up to slide number 1,000 and something here. See, it would help if you asked the questions in the same order that I have the answers. Now, that would really help. But Genesis chapter 1 is the summary of the, here it is, slide number 1197, Alt-DV 1197. Okay. Does Genesis 1 conflict with Genesis 1:2? No, don't need that right here. Okay. But when I was a brand new Christian, I went to a church camp, but a Methodist church camp. And the counselor there said he was an agnostic. And he didn't believe the Bible, and he spent the whole week trying to destroy our young faith in the Word of God. And he made this same objection here. Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 object. It says he made the trees on the third day in chapter 1, and the waters brought forth the birds or the fowl in Genesis chapter 1 on the fifth day. On the sixth day, he made animals, and then he made man last of all. But when you read chapter 2, God formed man of the dust of the ground and planted a garden and eat. Oh, wait a minute. I thought the plants were here before man. Chapter 1, they were. Now the plants are coming after man. And he made all the trees grow, okay? And then God said, I'll make the animals out of the ground in chapter 2. Here's the supposed contradiction. Chapter 1 has the grass, plants, trees made on day 3. Chapter 2 has them made on day 6. Chapter 1 has the birds made out of the water on day 5. Chapter 2 has the birds made out of the ground on day 6. Chapter 1 has the animals made before man. Chapter 2 has the animals made after man. Very simple to resolve. Day 3, God made the plants. Day 5, he made the birds out of the water. Day 6, he made the animals, and then he made man. Just man, not woman yet. Then he put man in the garden, and it only had the trees that are good for food in the garden. Then God made one more of the trees. He made the garden grow in front of Adam, and he made one more of each animal. The rest of the world's already full of animals. He's making one more of each kind so that Adam could name them and realize that's not suitable for a wife. And then he made Eve. So Adam was created, and then Eve, Adam got to see God actually create things. He saw it. Eve did not see God make anything. She was the last thing created. So that's the one Satan came to try to tempt. So it's not a contradiction at all. Day 6 was a busy day. He made all the animals, probably in about a microsecond, and then he made man. Then he put man in a garden and made the garden grow in front of him. Adam, watch this. Up out of the ground came all the trees and plants. Adam, watch this. Up out of the ground came each one of the animals. Name them, Adam. Let's assume the number 8,000 is correct. There's 8,000 animals, kinds of animals. Baraminology, baramin means kind. So Adam could name 8,000. I can speak 300 words a minute. I could name all the animals. I mean, if Adam had a super high IQ made straight from the hand of God, he could have named all the animals in a half hour. And God said, Adam, what do you think? God, they're beautiful, but they've all got a partner, Lord. Where's mine? God said, Adam, go to sleep, son. I got a surprise for you when you wake up. And he put him to sleep, took one small spare part out, made the world's first loudspeaker. Made Eve. And here we are. So no contradiction at all. Thank you for the question. Now, here's my prediction. When someone asks a question like that, they either have a good heart and they say, wow, that's true, that works. Or they've got a bad heart and they're looking for a way to deny the Bible, and they'll just come back with another question. Well, what about this? And what about this? And you can answer 5,000 questions for them, and they don't want to believe. So I don't know who asked the question there, but we'll see. I think that's a very logical, sufficient answer for someone who has a good heart. Go ahead.
Amen. Well said. Well said. I love the way you pointed out. Adam and Eve, Adam especially created directly from God with a high IQ, no mutations, no diseases. And, we can speak 300 words a minute now. Certainly not a problem for Adam to name all the animals. So what I'll do here for this next question is we've got a ton of questions, Dr. Hovind, dealing with the objection from tree ring dating. So what I'll do is just kind of combine them all into one and make it just a single question, summing them all up. Tree ring dating, does that refute a young Earth and confirm an old Earth?
Well, tree ring dating is not an exact science. The rings on the tree indicate growing season and good times and bad times. If they have a good spring with lots of rain, lots of sunshine, the tree grows a big, fat, healthy, soft ring. If you have a dry summer, it's going to grow a hard ring, which is why we get our grain pattern, which looks so pretty. The tree's been through good times, bad times, good times, bad times. God does that to us also to make us beautiful, I think. If the tree was all hard ring, it would snap when the wind blew it. If the tree was all soft, it couldn't stand up. It's too soft. So it's a laminate effect. That's what plywood is for. The lamination of hard, soft, hard, soft, hard, soft makes it both strong and flexible. And God puts us through these same things, good times, bad times, good times, bad times, and we end up both flexible and strong. But the tree can often produce 2 rings a year. It's a matter of you got a good spring, bad summer, good fall. You're going to get 2 rings. And I cover that about the tree ring dating on my video number 1. See if I can get more. Yeah, I got way too much here. Tree ring dating. I think everybody that understands it would quickly agree. Well, we don't know the age of a tree based upon the rings. It's a close guess. It's not on this particular presentation, but check my seminar part 1 where I show all the documentation. Trees can produce more than one ring a year. The oldest living tree is in about the 4,500 year range, 4,500 rings. So, and the Bible says the flood was about 4,500 years ago, so that would fit fine. What they've done to extend it back beyond that is called overlapping tree rings. Well, hold it. Trees on opposite sides of the same mountain will produce different ring pattern. You might have a tree that's overshadowing another one. I covered this the other night on my YouTube channel, Kent Hovind Official. You might have a big tree over a little one, and this one gets good sunlight, and this one doesn't. And when the big one dies, now this one gets good sunlight. And in the tree ring pattern, they were growing right next to each other, and they have different patterns. So there's way too many variables to call that an exact science. Okay, I certainly wouldn't question the Bible or God's word or Jesus' testimony that the creation of Adam was the beginning based upon a tree. I'll keep looking for that while you give the next question here.
Perfect. Yeah, I totally recommend people check out your seminar as well. Or even last week, you did a Bible study, Kent, where you had some great slides on tree ring dating and kind of verifying all these awesome points that you are making. So, what comes to mind, because you pointed out again that, he created Adam and Eve at the beginning. You debated this heretic months ago named Smokey Saint, and he made this argument to you. He said, well, it can't be the beginning because Adam and Eve were created on day 6. That's not day 1. That's not the beginning. I mean, we can clearly see the desperation in their arguments. But what are your thoughts on that if a critic were to say that?
Would it be fair for me to say the beginning of my life was 1953? Yeah.
Well,
that's a whole year. I could be more accurate and say it was January 1953. That's more accurate. I could say, well, the beginning of my life was January 15th, 1953, my birthday. Okay. Well, what time? I don't remember. I was little at the time. I had other things going on. I was so amazed at the stuff I saw in that hospital. I didn't speak a word for almost a year. So I don't know the time I was born. I don't care. That was the beginning of my life. So I think it's perfectly fine to say the beginning of the creation, when God made them male and female, that was the first week. He narrowed it down to 1 week. So I'm sorry if they're not happy with that, didn't get it to the day or the minute. Well, too bad.
Or, for example, when I wake up, the first hour of my day, what do? I maybe brush my teeth, eat breakfast, go to the washroom, take a shower, check my phone. All those things could certainly be considered to be the start of my day, the beginning of my day, even if it's not the very first thing I did. So, it's 2022 almost. It's a great time to be a young earth creationist. So the next question, Dr. Hovind, you've demolished dating methods. You've demolished tree ring dating. You've demonstrated from scripture that the Bible teaches a young earth. The science confirms a young earth. So this next question has to do with ice core dating. So we have several questions coming in pertaining to that objection. Might as well leave no stone unturned. Does ice core dating demonstrate an old earth and refute a young earth?
I have a whole section on that also on seminar part 1 about the ice cores. During World War II, some airplanes tried to join the war. They hit a storm over England, tried to fly back, ended up crash landing in Greenland. I'll show you the pictures if I can find it. This presentation only has 1,320 slides, okay, in this one. But when they landed in 1940 something, they abandoned the planes and went on and, somebody came and got them and they went on and fought the war. Well, a guy in 1990, I believe, got a brilliant idea. He said, hey, there's brand new airplanes sitting on the ice in Greenland. Let's go get them. They went over there and started drilling holes in the ice trying to find these airplanes that were buried down there called the Lost Squadron. I met the guy who headed up the crew digging the planes out. I went and talked to him. I've got an address and phone number and everything right here. If I can find it with all my slides. Anyway, I said, how long had the planes been on the ice? He said, they've been there about, I think, 45 years or whatever it was. I forget. I said, when you drilled down to get to the plane, did you go through ice rings? He said, yeah, many hundreds of them. I said, hold it. How do you get many hundreds of rings above an airplane that's been there for 45 years? Shouldn't there be like, 45 or 48, whatever the number was? Let's see, tree ring, no, ice core. There we go. So, there we go. Ice core dating right there. Man, here it is. Phone number. 1942, they landed. The Lost Squadron. Here's the objection. We'll go to slide number 793. Alt-DV, 793, enter. Here's a freezer in Denver, Colorado, where they save the ice cores. They've drilled cores all over in Greenland and Antarctica, drill holes through the ice. They have a big pipe. They drill down in and pull it up and snap off about 6 to 8 feet at a time of the ice core. Deepest ice core is Antarctica and Greenland, 3 kilometers, 2 miles. The oldest continuous ice core extends 130,000 years. No, it extends 130,000 rings. Same problem with the tree ring dating. Record-shattering 2.7 million year old ice core. Really? How did they date that? They got this big pipe, they stand it up, drill it down, pull it down, lay it down, pull the ice core out. Right there. These are the rings they're talking about. The assumption is if in the summertime, the top layer will melt a little bit and refreeze and make clear ice. But in the winter, it keeps compressing the snow and makes milky colored ice. So they assume that the clear and milky is summer, winter, summer, winter. Well, what if you get a warm week and then a cold week and then a warm week and then a cold week? These ice cores are not reliable to date the age of the Earth. These rings on here, snow melt on a warm day will refreeze, making a layer of clear ice on top of compressed snow, which will be milky. You can get many of these. In Greenland, it says the annual rings are very thin. The deepest core is over 10,000 feet, 135,000 years, all based on the assumption that those rings are annual. Duh. A kindergartner ought to be able to figure that out. You don't know each one's a year. What if you had a warm summer, cold snap, refroze, another warm time? They represent warm, cold, not summer, winter, summer, winter. They told me the layers are annual rings. This is baloney. Warm days, cold nights would give 7 layers in a week. Here we go. Annual layers. They call this, the Lost Squadron are the airplanes that landed in Greenland, 1942. I talked to the guy who dug the planes out. I'll give you his contact info. Middleborough, Kentucky. They've got a museum there for the plane they took out. They took it apart at the bottom of the hole. Let's see, they drilled down, got to it, took the plane apart, brought the pieces up, put it back together in Middleborough, Kentucky. There it is right there. They were in the ground for 48 years under the ice, 263 feet down. That's 5.5 feet a year of snow ice would accumulate. 10,000 feet divided by 5.5 is only 1,800 years. See, the deepest core they've ever drilled is 10,000 feet. That's only 2,000 years worth, if you want to go by simply depth and forget the rings. Planes do not sink in the ice. Planes are always made nose heavy. If you run out of gas, you want it to come in so you can guide it. You don't want the tail heavy coming in like this. The airplanes are made slightly nose heavy, okay? Well, Bob Cardin at the museum is the guy who helped dig out the plane and kind of in charge of one of the crews there. They went down 62 feet and they hit a plywood cover left by the 1983 expedition 8 years earlier. So in 8 years, they got 62 feet of ice on top of their plywood. Talk to Bob. Brian Irwin of New York flies to the South Pole often to deliver supplies and has lots of info on the ice cores. There's his phone number. I don't know if the phone number is still good or not. But when I talked to Bob, I said, when you drilled down to get to the plane, did you go through ice rings? He said, yeah, many hundreds of them. How do you get hundreds of ice rings in 42 years? They're not annual. Duh. He said they got 30 to 40 rings accumulated in just 9 years while they're working on the project. This article still calls them annual layers. Scientific American, baloney. Ice core ring dating. They still call them annual layers. They're either lying or they're stupid. Tell them I said so. I'll debate them on the topic. How far back can ice cores go? 800,000 years. Well, you might have 800,000 rings, but it's not 800,000 years. The thickness of each layer allows scientists to determine how much snow fell there during a particular year. That could vary by so many different things. Which way is the wind blowing? What time of year is it? You think snowfall is a regular event? Ask anybody that lives up north. You could get 2 feet in one night and then get nothing for weeks. That's ridiculous. Ice cores correspond to seasons and years. Let's see, annual layer of ice. I'm sorry, these are not annual layers. They're simply mistaken. Dating ice cores. So I got a ton of stuff on this Australian Antarctic program where they take these ice cores and try to get them to see annual layers recorded in an ice core can be counted. Like counting. This is worse than tree ring dating. Okay, much worse. They're not annual layers. Sorry, tell them I said they're lying or stupid. Okay. Any other questions?
I appreciate that. I love how detailed your responses are, Kent. Matt, go ahead. Over to you, brother.
Okay, sure. This one is again about annual rings, but it's different. It's hyper specific. The question is, why is there a glass sponge off the coast of China 11,000 years old based on its annual rings?
A glass sponge? A what?
Yeah, a glass sponge. They found a sponge that they started studying. I think the study goes back to Max Planck Institute in 2012, maybe earlier, I forget. And what they did is they started studying sponges to determine temperature change of the ocean. And they said that this sponge, because it's so old, we can study it to see the temperature change off the coast. They live at like below 1,000 meters. So they started studying it for temperature change, but he wanted to know how could it date so old based on its annual rings.
Well, obviously it dated that old because they don't know what they're doing. They dated it wrong.
Yeah, it's based on like a silicon dioxide is what the sponge is made out of. And so
I'd have to do some more study on that, but I'd be willing to bet it's the same thing as the tree ring or the ice core. Just another attempt to see, like I said, they are frantic to keep billions of years. The Bible clearly teaches 6,000. Just that simple fact destroys all the evolution theory. It doesn't matter if animals were capable of changing from an amoeba to an elephant. There isn't enough time. So they have to have time, and time is their pacifier. And you'll see them jump in. They're frantic to grab at anything that will keep time on their side. So this Chinese sponge is the new one. I'll do some research on that. Okay.
Yeah. I looked into it at one point, and basically what I've determined is that they said, based on the ocean in that area, that the amount of manganese, the mineral, is very, very low. And so when they test the sponge, it has low amounts of manganese in each ring. So they said, see, that proves that it's really, really old because there's not a lot. But in our flood models, whether it's catastrophic plate tectonics or hydroplate theory, it doesn't really matter because we admit that volcanism is the reason that happened during the flood, lots of volcanic ash. Well, they determined that most of the manganese comes from volcanoes. So that's why it's there.
So are they going to sell it in a Chinese restaurant?
I'm sure they'll eat it. They eat everything there.
Okay, a delicacy. Okay, I would be willing to bet ICR, Institute for Creation Research.org, has already done stuff on the Chinese sponge. If not, Ken Ham, Answers in Genesis. They probably got somebody answered that already, but I'll have to work on that one. That'd be more. Just what I need. I need more slides. That's what I need. Go ahead.
Yeah. I guess 45,000, it isn't enough. But I think you nailed it, Kent. When they just won't tap out. They'll just. But I noticed they won't only not tap out. They won't address the arguments we're putting forth. For example, C14 in diamonds. Dinosaur fossils, coal, so on and so. That just can't be. But they won't actually address or refute it. They just want to, go to another and then another and another. So, they're willingly ignorant. But this next question, I put it up on screen, Dr. Hovind, came in from the chat. And they're asking you, can you ask Kent why the Bible says a day with Jesus is like 1,000 years?
It says 1 day with the Lord is as 1,000 years. I think not only was there a 6-day creation with a day of rest, there's going to be 6,000 years of human history with a 1,000-year period called the millennium. Milli meaning millennium, 1,000. Let's see, let me get to my different one. No. I got too many things open here now, right there. Well, you got me confused. But I have a big chart behind me over here. Steve, can you pan in on that one or take my slide down? Is he up there still? Oh, tech guy's gone. I have a big chart that I make when I wrote my book about end times. What on earth is about to happen, for heaven's sake? I did this and I did a video series here somewhere. Yeah, the Woe series, What on Earth is About to Happen. You can get these on drdino.com. It looks to me like God is working on us. Here it is, a 7,000-year calendar. Slide number 114, Alt-DV 114. Okay. So the creation of the earth was about 6,000 years ago, 4,000 BC. Then we have the flood, and then the call of Abraham and David and Jesus. Today it's been about 6,000 years. The pale purple part there is the day of the Lord. A day of the Lord is as 1,000 years. I think that day is the seventh day of rest, day of the Lord. So I think not only was there a 6-day creation with a seventh day of rest, there's going to be 6,000 years of human history with 1,000 years of rest. The millennium, it's called millennium. So, okay, that's, and based on this, I went through studying this a long time. I came up with, in 2013, when I wrote my book and published it, so I was publishing parts of it on the internet as I was going. People kept asking me, when's the Lord coming back? When's the Lord coming back? When does the tribulation start? I said, I don't know. I'm not going to set a date. But if I had to guess, I would guess the Lord comes back in 2028 because he was probably crucified in the year 28. You know, our calendar starts with the birth of Christ, Christmas. Why do you start with the birth? It didn't change much. It was the crucifixion and resurrection that changed things. And we know our calendar is off by a couple of years because some Pope Gregory made up the current calendar. We use the Gregorian calendar. Jesus was born in about 3 or 4 BC. So let's assume the year 28 is when he'd actually died and rose from the dead. That's when we should have started our calendar. And God seems to do everything on 1,000-year marks, so 2028 would be another 1,000-year mark from the birth of Christ. And so the 7-year tribulation comes before that, and we're here for the whole thing. I used to teach we get out before the tribulation. Just plain not true. I wish it was. So I said, I think the tribulation is going to start 2021. Then it's going to gradually build up for 3 years and get worse. And I've got more stuff on that one. Let's see. Right here, 116, Alt-DV, 116. No, it's not on that one. I'm sorry. But get my book or my video on that. I think all this stuff we've got going on with the mandatory, got to be marked and get a passport, and it's going to lead to, in the next 3.5 years, if you don't have this microchip in your hand, you cannot buy or sell. I mean, you can see that coming like a freight train right now. Walgreens is putting in cases where all their material to buy is behind a case, like an ice cream case at Walmart. You got to open the big door to get your ice cream out. Well, they've got these cases with their stuff behind there, and it's got a scanner on the top to read your forehead or a scanner by the handle to read your hand. You can't open the case unless you got a chip. They haven't done it yet, but they're prepping up for it. It's coming. So, Hovind theory, go ahead.
I appreciate it, Kent. Great answer. As we kind of start winding things down, I'm curious as to your thoughts on this objection that I know you've heard over and over again. You had a fantastic debate recently on this channel with Kenny Rhodes from Reasons to Believe, and one of his and just so many critics' main argument now against the young Earth creation model is they'll say, well, there's too much coal and oil and natural gas on the planet to be explained in just a few thousand years and from a global flood. Is that really the case? Kent, what's a good rebuttal to that?
Well, I was debating Jeannie Scott in California at their atheist organization, and she said the same thing. There's too much coal in the world. She said, Mr. Hovind, if you took every tree in the world, every blade of grass, every bush, and squeezed them and pressed them into coal, by the way, they can make coal in 20 minutes in the laboratory. Take a piece of wood under heat and pressure, turn it to coal in 20 minutes. But she said, if you took every blade of grass in the world and pressed it, you could not make all the coal that's down in the world, in the ground. I said, I agree. She said, don't you see there had to be millions or billions of years? I said, no. Obviously, you're starting with the assumption that the amount of plants on the world today is what was there when the flood started. God created the world to be inhabited. That's why he made it. Today, 70% of it is underwater. A whole bunch more is under desert or ice caps. 3% of this planet is habitable for mankind. 3%. What we are seeing today is not what Adam and Eve saw. They had a world that was mostly plants, mostly probably from the pole to pole. If the earth were not tilted over 23.5 degrees, but just simply perpendicular, like it is on March 20th on vernal equinox, spring equinox and fall equinox, everybody would get 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of darkness. And if the earth had a canopy overhead, like I believe it did, a canopy of ice 10 miles up, a couple inches thick, to make the earth like a big greenhouse, it would equalize temperature, it would increase air pressure, and you could have plants all over the place. When they go to the South Pole and drill through the ice, they find trees. There's coal at the South Pole. Obviously, it was once covered by vegetation. So I think if the earth was much more lush vegetation worldwide, today, 70% is underwater, a lot of it's desert and ice cap. So you could make all the coal if the earth had more. I've got slides on all this, just answering that question about coal formation. But Matt did a great one. He showed a picture where they've got like 7 or 8 consecutive layers of coal, and all of them carbon date the same age. Matt Powell did that. Interesting. So anyway, I'll get the coal slide up for another time. But yeah, I think all the coal formed at the flood. If the water's coming up 200 feet, see the tide, if right now the tide comes up and bangs into stuff, it gets interrupted by hitting the continents. But if the earth were covered with water and no interruption for the tide would become harmonic and would be a 200-foot tidal change every 6 hours, 12.5 minutes. Well, if the water's coming up 200 feet, the water has to be rushing in from the sides to stay under the moon's gravity at the same speed the earth is turning. At my latitude in Lenox, Alabama, we're turning nearly 900 miles an hour. At the equator, 1,037.6, depending upon your altitude. But so the water rushing in sideways would knock all the trees down and bury them under a layer of mud. And just the tide going up and down every 6 hours, 12.5 minutes during Noah's flood would make layers of trees, layer of mud. A couple days later, another layer of trees as stuff is swashing back and forth. Look at what happened in Mount St. Helens. 1980, it erupted 40 years ago. There are still trees floating in Spirit Lake 40 years later, still floating. Many million, not million, maybe hundreds of thousands of them settled to the bottom of Spirit Lake. It was a great example of what the flood could have done, only it's on a small scale. So I think the flood is the best answer for all the coal seams that we have. There is a lot more coal in the world, in the ground, than all the trees would make. They are correct. But they're incorrect in assuming that the earth today is like it was then. There's their problem. Okay?
Amen. Amen. It's those same assumptions that they're guilty of. And I notice a double standard from them, Kent, because we know that coal, oil, and natural gas can be formed quickly through a lot of heat and pressure, right? And then they'll say, well, the flood would produce too much heat. It would have boiled the oceans, melted the crust. And then they want to say, we can't explain all the coal, oil, and natural gas today. Well, all that heat you're complaining about can be utilized to rapidly form all of the coal, oil, and natural gas. So it looks like the heat is a feature of the flood and not a bug, like they keep saying. So what we're going to do here is I've got 100 questions. We're just going to have to wrap it up, I guess, with this last one here that, I'll put it up on screen. Dr. Hovind, again, I always appreciate the time you give us. I always appreciate how thorough your answers are. We could definitely talk to you all day. So here's the last one. Here's another common objection we see, especially frequently. Can the global flood model explain rapid plant growth after the flood? The critics say no, of course.
Well, we know that from the dates given in the Bible, Genesis chapter 6, 7, and 8, Noah was in the ark for over a year. Let's say 380 days or whatever it was, okay? That doesn't mean the earth's covered in water that whole time. Parts of the earth might have only been covered in water for a few days. The crust of the earth is broken up into plates like an eggshell. Nobody argues about that. And the crust of the earth is flexing up and down. And so parts of the earth might have actually only been inundated for a few days or a few weeks, just long enough to drown everybody. How long would that take? So I think they're based on the assumption that all the plants were completely wiped out and the earth is bare when he gets off the ark. No. All the animals were dead. All the people were dead. But I don't think plants can survive being inundated. Well, Debbie, you're a farmer. How long can a plant be underwater and come back and be fine? Could be months. Take a look at the swamps in Louisiana. So I think plants can handle that kind of stuff. A short period inundation. Some live, cypress trees stay in the water. So I think Noah was in the ark. When he got out, the earth still had lots of plants growing. Insects didn't have to go on the ark. They could survive in the plants or on the floating log mats. They could survive places where people could not survive for months. That would be my answer to that, is that they're laboring under the false delusion that the earth was bare naked when Noah got out of that ark. After he hit bottom, God made him wait in there for like 4 more months. By then, all the trees are producing fruit again, all the plants are producing seeds, and plenty to eat outside. He didn't get out of the ark until there was food supply ready. Read the story carefully. God thought of everything.
Amen. Well said. So here's one last final question that came in from Cover to Cover Book Reviews. He says, Kent, any new project ideas coming forth from your late night peanut butter on pizza inventions? Is that true? Do you have peanut butter on pizza, Kent?
We give tours all the time. I give tours here today of our place. They say, man, this Dinosaur Adventureland's amazing. I say, well, don't tell anybody, but we really don't have a plan. What I do, I eat pizza with peanut butter on it before I go to bed. And you wake up at 2 in the morning with cool ideas. That's how I got my daughter, but that's a different story. So that's a joke, but the idea is going on now. We're building a little water tower. Somebody gave us a big 7,000-gallon tank, so we're going to build a tower for it. We just got the poles today, $400 a piece. Those things are heavy, aren't they? Yeah, you guys dragged them in 50-foot poles. So yeah, and dangerous. Anyway, so we'll be doing that. But no, we're about done in the building phase, we hope, and youth groups and things will start coming, Boy Scout groups to come to our camp, Dinosaur Adventureland. Hopefully, we can scale back on the construction projects, and we do want to produce a lot of short videos. Matt and I are going to do hundreds of these to put up on Kent Hovind Official, where they'll be addressing, just like your questions tonight, one question, one thorough answer, call it done. Tree rings, bang, produce a 5-minute video, 7-minute video. Do another one on starlight. So we're going to have hundreds of short clips. Instead of each of my videos on my series, when they get my seminar series, each one's nearly 2 hours long. I keep saying video. I'm old school. DVD. Okay. We're going to do a lot of short clips like that. All around Dinosaur Adventureland, we're doing signs and stuff on each different animal. Like we have some great gray herons that live in one of our lakes. We have 16 lakes and ponds here. Well, there are 67 different varieties of great gray herons, or of herons. They might have had a common ancestor called a heron. That doesn't prove mosquitoes are related to whales. So as I do the outside tour around here a couple times a day, we stop and talk about all the different amazing plants and animals and stuff. And we want God to get the glory for his creation instead of some stupid evolution, time, chance, hope it happens kind of stuff. We think that's dumb. Okay?
Amen. Amen. Wait a minute, Dr. Hovind. Are you saying that whales and pine trees are not related because they're both eukaryotes?
Well, whales and dogs both bark, but it's in a different. I mean, pine trees and dogs both have bark, but it's a little different. Okay. Yeah, okay.
And bananas and elephants are both yellow except for the elephant.
Right.
Great response, Dr. Dino. This has been another fantastic Q&A. An hour and a half flies by. We've had close to 200 people with a ton of questions. Everybody in the audience, I want to thank you for your questions, your comments, your super chats, your support. You guys are the life and blood of this ministry. And Matt, I believe there's a question people are asking how they can purchase your slides and videos and so on and so forth. Kent, that's on your website, right? Dr. Dino.
Website is website drdino.com, D-R-D-I-N-O. They can call 855-BIG-DINO, like a big dinosaur, and go to extension 1 or 2. That'll take you to one of the secretaries. So I want the slides. It's a thumb drive with all 45,000. All the slides I use in my seminar, all the slides I use as I prepare my Bible studies that I've done here through the book. We're going through Proverbs now. We went through Matthew, 1st, 2nd Samuel. I add stuff to it all the time. So yeah, thumb drive with all PowerPoint slides. I'm going to do a video on PowerPoint for boneheads because that's about the only computer program I really understand. But I got that one down pretty good. Yeah, they can call those numbers and get it, or just or on our website, drdino.com, and get the slides. Steve, when they order the thumb drive with all the slides, well, we should probably update that every couple of weeks since I add so much new stuff all the time. Okay? All right. Well, I have a dilemma. I have to drink a lot of water because my throat goes bad from talking all day. But when I drink a lot of water, I need to leave. So,
yeah, amen. Actually,
done, brother.
and that goes for me as well. So well earned, well deserved. Kent, God bless, brother. Matt, thank you for being co-host. Everybody at Dell, God bless as well. Merry Christmas, and thanks for tuning in to the audience. Standing for Truth,
Thank you so
Dr.
much.
Hovind and Matt are out. All right, looks like we are live here on Standing for Truth. I want to welcome everybody to the show tonight. On Standing for Truth, as you know, we focus on the truth of biblical creation. And we have a very exciting program for everybody tonight. An exciting and very important program, I should say. I'm very pleased to say that we have once again with us Dr. Kent Hovind for a presentation on lies in the textbooks, followed by an audience Q&A. So guys, please make sure you are tagging me at Standing for Truth. That way I will not miss your question. Now, Kent Hovind, he has been an incredible blessing to this ministry. He has helped us tremendously, including giving us his time for about 18 shows, including debates, interviews, and discussions. So please check the playlist titled Dr. Kent Hovind on Standing for Truth for all the previous shows that I have had with Dr. Hovind. I've also got my award-winning co-host here with me tonight, George Bond. George, I know you are in the future all the way in Australia, but I want to thank you for joining me and Dr. Hovind for tonight's incredibly important show. George, you are on mute, brother, if you had a couple words.
Yeah, if you want to know the share price of some of the companies you invest in, let me know, and I'll give you a heads up before you buy them.
Very sweet of you, very sweet of you. And Dr. Hovind, thank you so much for being here and giving us your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. George, I think you had a couple introductory words, I think, before we get into the presentation.
Just for the audience, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are. As we say in Australia, good day, mate. And since the subject we're talking about is lies, it's not surprising that according to a professor at the Montclair State University, I believe his name is Julian Keenan, this is what he said. He said, I'm quoting here, lying is a product of evolution. Therefore, if creationists failed to catch the lie, evolutionary ethics considers it as a success. End quote. So hence to an evolutionist, lying is just a product of evolution and it's not unethical. And because everyone is here to actually listen to my joke, just one short joke. What are the two biggest lies when working for a large corporation? Number one, hello, I'm from head office and I'm here to help you. Number two, welcome, we're glad to have you. On that note, I'll hand it over to you, Stanley.
On that note, yes, thank you so much, George. I appreciate it. And Dr. Hovind, I'm going to hand it over to you for your presentation, a few introductory words if you'd like to, of course, but the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, sir. Good to be with you again, brother. Come on down, visit. We build stuff all the time down here. We are straight north of Pensacola, Florida, 70 miles out in the middle of no place, Alabama. And we believe the Bible is true. We're building a museum, a science center, a theme park, and it is really, really fun. All done with volunteers and donations. Some of the volunteers are a little more skilled than others, and some are a little less skilled than others, but we're having a blast down here. We don't really have a plan. Well, I just eat a lot of pizza with peanut butter on it before I go to bed, and you wake up at 2 a.m. with cool ideas.
I'm gonna have to try that
my daughter. That's another story. Okay, so there's all kinds of fun stuff to do here. We have 4 different tours now. Our barn tour, the farm animals and stuff is incredible. The Inside Science Center tour, the outside tour of 140 acres and all the lakes and everything. We try to make everything have a science lesson with a spiritual application. The goal is to follow Jesus' example. He would tell his disciples, hey, consider the lilies. Why would I want to look at a flower? Well, they're beautiful and they don't worry about their clothes. Science lesson, spiritual application. Consider the sparrows. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. So we've got probably nearly 500 science lessons we use that teach a spiritual truth. We've got all kinds of stuff going on. We just want to strengthen people's faith in the Word of God. I taught high school science 15 years, and I think evolution theory is the dumbest and most dangerous religion in the history of the planet. This is the center of the New World Order. You have to have people believing there's no absolute authority anywhere, because then man gets to be the authority. I do a lot of debates with atheists. One of them told me, he said, there are no absolutes. I said, are you absolutely sure? I stumped him. How can you be absolutely sure there's no absolutes? Anyway, I like defending the Bible. I believe it's true. God made the earth about 6,000 years ago, made everything, sun, moon, stars, earth, dinosaurs, everything in 6 days. So one of my concerns, teaching high school science 15 years, and I collect science textbooks, and I speak at lots of schools and churches and about 240 debates now at universities and stuff, they're lying to the kids. There are several just fundamental, simple lies that permeate everything. It generally starts with what they call their geologic column. You know, they had the movie Jurassic Park. Well, what's that about? The Jurassic Age. Well, what is that? Oh, yes, boys and girls, 65 million years ago in the Jurassic. There is no such thing as a Jurassic Age. There's no such thing as a geologic column. Here's what happened. Here's the history behind that. James Hutton in the 1700s wrote a book and said the earth is much older than people think. Up until about the 1700s, almost everybody said the earth is 6,000 years old, because if you add up the dates in the Bible, that's what you get, about 4,000 BC for the creation. I don't put an exact date on it and say it was 4004 BC, October 23rd at 2 in the afternoon. I do think Adam was made in the afternoon, though, because it was just before Eve. And I think God made Adam first because he didn't want any advice on how to do it. Just my humble opinion. Anyway, so about 6,000 years was the history of the age of the earth, according to everybody, up until about 300 years ago. James Hutton said it's much older than that. He said the processes we see today is what's always been happening for a long time. So if you see Grand Canyon getting a little bit deeper as a rocks erode, you can do the math and say, oh, wow, it loses a quarter inch a year. It's 5,000 feet deep. Do the math. Wow, this is really old. No. But his book that he wrote had a profound influence on a guy named Charles Lyell. Charles Lyell had a hatred for the Bible because of his lifestyle. People that like to sin don't like God's word. It kind of generally holds true. Charles Lyell invented what we call today the geologic column. And this is where the problem starts. Principles of Geology, the book that he wrote. He talked about a process called uniformitarianism. Charles Lyell was a lawyer from Scotland that hated the Bible. Somebody told me one time they figured out that if all the lawyers in the world were laid end to end around the equator, we would all be better off. But Charles Lyell wrote his book, Principles of Geology, in 1830. In that book, he invented what they still use today as the geologic column. Still taught today, and it's not found any place in the world. It doesn't exist. He said, you can see his hatred for the Bible by reading his book. He said, men of superior talent, he's talking about himself, who thought for themselves and were not blinded by authority. He said, you believe in an ancient doctrine and you have a scriptural authority. He's mocking the Bible is what he's doing. Religion, as well as those of sound philosophy, have suffered perpetually by the mixing of sacred writings with questions of science. They don't think science fits with the Bible. Science fits perfectly fine with the Bible. Science doesn't fit with evolution, and the Bible doesn't fit with evolution, but science and the Bible fit fine. Lyell said he reasoned philosophically against those who regarded the disordered state of Earth's crust as exhibiting signs of the wrath of God. See, up until Lyell's time, everybody would look at the layers in Grand Canyon and say, wow, there was a worldwide flood. And the water going up and down and in and out with the tides would make all these layers in 1 year. Charlie Lyell came along, started giving each layer a different name and an age. He said, you have a religious prejudice if you believe the Bible. He invented our geologic column, and he said deliberately his goal was to free the science from Moses. What do you suppose he meant by that? He doesn't like people looking at the rock layers and thinking, wow, this is evidence for a flood. The Bible says in 2 Peter 3, at the end of time, there will be scoffers who will be willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood and the coming judgment of God. And boy, have we got them today. Well, Lyell made up all these names, the Latin names, the Cretaceous, Jurassic, Triassic, Permian, Mississippian, Devonian, all that stuff. The whole thing he made up in the 1800s, 1830s. It doesn't exist anywhere. He would name something like Jurassic. You say, well, how do you know how old the fossils are in that layer? Oh, that layer is 70 million, therefore the fossils have to be 70 million. Well, how do you know the fossils are 70 million? Because they're found in a 70 million-year-old layer. But how do you know the layer is 70 million? Well, because it contains a 70 million-year-old fossil. Pure circular reasoning. There is no geologic column anywhere. That's the Bible, though, to the evolutionist. And this is where the problem starts. And they're brainwashing the kids before they can even read. In kindergarten, they'll say, oh, yeah, during the Jurassic period. In the kindergarten, what's the Jurassic period? Oh, it's 70 million years ago. And the kids love dinosaurs, but they use dinosaurs to turn kids away from God. And by the time they've heard that for kindergarten, first grade, second grade, all the way through high school or college, they're going to believe it. The layers are not different ages. If you shuffle a deck of cards, is the top card younger? They say the top layer is younger. I say, stop. Where's it coming from? Outer space? No. All the layers were on the earth at the same time. They got shuffled up. We have a demo we do here with a jar of rock, sand, gravel, and water. You shake it up, it always settles into the same layers, gravel, sand, clay, every time, without exception. Now, if you shake up a jar like that and it separates into gravel, sand, clay, is the top layer younger? No. They're all in the jar at the same time. They're all the same age. How can the top layer be younger? Is the material coming from outer space? They don't think about this. Wow, stop, think. There is no geologic column. Does it exist? No, it doesn't exist. Now, it's a fact the Earth has layers. That's a fact. It is not a fact they're millions of years old, but the evolutionist's interpretation of that fact is these layers form slowly over millions of times. I say stop right there and think about it. From where? Where's this new material coming from, guys? The creationist says the layers are all from the flood in the days of Noah. It's a no-brainer. The atheists are always trying to erase that line between their theory and the interpretation. The fact is the Earth has layers. Their theory is not a fact. It's a theory about the fact. Anyway, the geologic column is the Bible for the evolutionist. It can only be found one place in the world, and that is the textbooks. And they admit it. This guy said, if there were a column of sediments, unfortunately, no such column exists. I would suspect the author of that textbook got fired shortly thereafter. They have this geologic column. If the geologic column existed in one place, it'd be 100 miles thick. There is no geologic column. It's lie number 7 I cover in my video series. People can get my whole series at 18 hours, talking fast and using lots of slides, $50 for the whole thing. Call 855-BIG-DINO. There's no geologic column. They talk about the Holdenville Shale. Well, here's the Perry Farm Shale. Here's the Nowata Shale. Here's the Bandera Shale. Mine Creek Shale. Wait a minute. How come there's shale scattered all through this geologic column? How do you tell the difference? If it's all shale, why do they give it different ages? This is where the joke comes in. Let's see, there's limestone. Limestone. Wow. Now, what's the difference between 70 million-year-old limestone and 200 million-year-old limestone? It's limestone. There's no difference. The article is a detailed examination of the young Earth creationist claim that the geologic column does not exist. It shows that the entire geologic column exists in North Dakota. Oh, they found one place where they think the layers are in the order that they want them to be. They should be in that same order all over the world. They're not. Out of the 12 layers of the geologic column, it's just random chance. Of course, you're going to find limestone, shale, slate in a certain order once in a while, and they found it in North Dakota. So this is the Minnetonka limestone, which was deposited in hypersaline waters. Wow. Well, during the flood, the crust of the earth would be all busted up. The best, and I taught earth science 15 years and love studying this, the best way to explain the tangled up mess the crust of the earth is in is from the Bible. The Bible says the fountains of the deep were broken open. Well, there used to be water under the crust of the earth. Genesis 1 says God made the earth and divided the waters which were under the earth from the waters which were above. There used to be, God said he founded the earth upon the seas. What's now in our oceans, great big oceans out here. The earth today is 71% underwater, 29% above water. There's enough water out there in the oceans. If you smoothed out the earth right now today, the water would cover the earth 8,800 feet deep, a mile and a half. Plenty to drown in. So one atheist said, if there was a worldwide flood, where'd all that water go? It's still here. It's in the oceans. God formed the earth to be inhabited, the Bible says, and today only 3% of it is habitable. So something happened. I think it got destroyed by a flood. But the fountains of the deep breaking open and that water shooting out explains a lot of things, and I cover that in my video number 6. So index fossils might have been found in order in some place. That's a result of random shuffling. Of course, they find fossil. They talk about the fossil record. I say, stop, guys. There is no such thing as a fossil record. When you find a fossil, like this petrified clam, you should notice immediately 2 things. Number 1, it does not talk. Nope. Number 2, it does not have a date stamped on it. It doesn't say made by a clam in 38 million BC. It doesn't say that. How do you tell the age of a fossil? Only one way. Where did you find it? Take a fossil to any university and say, how old is this fossil? First question they ask, oh, where did you find it? What difference does that make? Well, they want to find their geologic chart and say, oh, that's from the Cenozoic era. They date the fossils by the layers they come from. These layers that we see all over the world are interesting. If that layer sat there for 4 million years waiting for the next one, don't you think it's going to rain once in a while in 4 million years and create some gullies and erosion marks? Why are they all stacked like pancakes? Where's the erosion marks between the layers? They may find them occasionally rare, but it should be all over. But these layers, nice, neat stratification, are found everywhere. You take a jar, sand, gravel, clay, shake it up, it'll settle into layers. You ever seen them little sand things? You flip it over, makes 20 or 30 or 40 layers in a matter of seconds. We flip ours, so we got a couple of them down at the cliff. We showed the kids, this was a gravel pit for years, and you can see the 7 layers of gravel. Gravel, sand, clay, gravel, sand, clay. So I say to boys and girls, how did we get all these gravel layers in Lenox, Alabama? Well, the moon pulls the water up on the earth and makes a bump called the high tide. It holds that bump like a magnet while we spin around. So here's the moon holding up a bump of water. And I get where you can see it. I can't, the picture's not big enough. Okay. The moon pulls up a bump about 5 feet in Florida, and the earth is spinning around. So as the earth spins around, that bump stays right under the moon, the bump of water. The moon never sees low tide. But the people on Earth get to see high tide, low tide, high tide, low tide. It would change every 6 hours, but the moon's also moving once a month around the Earth. So it ends up 6 hours, 12 and a half minutes. Who cares? Anyway, the tidal change goes up and down about 5 feet in Florida because it bangs into something called Florida. There's stuff sticking up through the water called continents. But during the flood, they wouldn't have that. If you smoothed out the world and the earth did not have these big continents sticking up through, the tide would not get interrupted and the tide would become a harmonic tide. Musicians know about harmonics. It would very quickly become a 200-foot tidal change. If the water came up and down 200 feet, well, it came up 200 feet in 6 hours, 12 and a half minutes. Where'd all the water come from to fill that bump? It's being dragged sideways by moon's gravity at the same speed the earth is turning. Here in Lenox, Alabama, we're 31 degrees above the equator. You can do all the trig on that. There's Lenox, Alabama, right there. You get sine, cosine, tangent, and say, okay, wow, look at that. Lenox, Alabama, adjacent divided by the hypotenuse. Wow, at 0.85412667. Man, we are traveling 886 miles an hour. Right now, right here, We're going 886 miles an hour toward the left, toward the east. Well, suppose, I mean, at the equator, you're going 1,037. Atlantic's 886. Okay. Well, that means the water's rushing into that bump at that same speed. If the water's moving laterally at 800 miles an hour, what's that going to do? Well, it's going to move a bunch of sediments in a flash. It's going to be dragging things around because the water's moving 900 miles an hour. It makes what's called a turbidity current, and it would automatically separate them into layers. Gravel, sand, clay, gravel, sand, clay, just like our little toy does here. And it would take all the rocks and roll them against each other and round them off like a rock tumbler does. You can take a rock tumbler and tumble rocks around and get them all nice and shiny and just rolling them around against each other. During the flood, the whole earth was a giant rock tumbler. Gravel all over the world is rounded. And they keep calling it river rock. Guys, the gravel layers we're digging in here in Lennox go all the way to North Carolina. That would have been a wide river. No, it's flood rock. Come take a look. Take some home with you. How many rocks do we have around here? Billions. Plenty. Take a few home, okay? These layers form quickly. But the kids are taught the layers are different ages. And they have to memorize this stupid stuff like Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic. It is absolutely insane. It's not true. The Bible says they delight in lies. Textbooks talk about exposing fossils long buried in sedimentary rocks. Colorado River cut through layer upon layer of rock over millions of years. Absolute baloney. We got a whole demo. We come down to see Dinosaur Adventureland. We do a demo on the rapid formation of canyons. Grand Canyon probably formed in a week, not millions of years. So one of the lies we cover in our textbook is about that river did not make that canyon. Then they tell the kids, well, in the fossil record, I say, stop right there. There is no fossil record. It doesn't exist. Fossils don't talk. There's no date on them. You're putting your interpretation on them. First place, fossils don't form today at all in any significant numbers. How many animals died today in the world, would you guess? Billions. How many are going to fossilize? None. Why not? They don't get buried. Fossilization only occurs when an animal is buried quickly. There is no such thing as a fossil record. But the textbooks teach the kids, oh yes, boys and girls, the fossil record. Stop right there. They're lying. There is no fossil record. No fossils count as evidence for evolution, of course. When you find a bone in the dirt, all you know is it died. You couldn't prove it had any kids. You sure couldn't prove it had different kids. No animal today is capable of producing offspring other than its same kind. I bet if this clam had any babies, they would turn out to be clams. I'd be willing to bet $5 on that. Maybe I might have 7 in my wallet, $7. All we've ever seen in the history of the world, every farmer will tell you, cows produce cows. You plant grass, you get grass. You plant corn, you get corn. There are no exceptions. But the atheist wants our kids to believe that corn and cows and bananas and whales are all related. That is absolute insanity. They say, well, yeah, if you give it enough time, adding time won't help. Time makes it worse. Everything falls apart. Adding energy won't help. We added a bunch of energy to Hiroshima and Nagasaki and didn't organize a thing for them over there. So this geologic column, I think, is one of the most serious lies in the textbooks that kids are taught. I cover many, about 50 lies in the textbooks on my video number 4 of my series you can get for $50. And then, by the way, brother, it's not copyrighted. You can copy it or keep it, but if you send it back, get your money back, minus the cost of the shipping. I used to loan my videos out when I started. I learned immediately Baptists don't steal, but they do borrow and never return. So you got to buy it. Then you can get your money back afterwards, okay? But the textbooks teach the kids that the embryo, the baby growing inside the mother, has gills like a fish. This, to me, is one of the most serious lies in the textbooks that they teach. Have I gone too long? You told me to go 20 minutes. Is it 25, 30?
Well, you take your time, Dr. Hovind.
Okay. Oh, one more lie. I like this one. They say the embryo has gill. This is lie number 12 in my video series number 4. Evidence of evolution from development. What are they saying here? The similarity between early stages of development of many different animals helped convince Darwin that all forms of life shared common ancestors. What was it that talked Charlie into believing in evolution? The embryos look similar, he said. Darwin considered this by far the strongest single class of facts in favor of his theory. Ernst Haeckel called it the biogenetic law. He said ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. What does that mean? a bunch of Latin words. It means as the baby grows, it goes through the stages of evolution. Just remember the word farm, F-A-R-M, fish, amphibian, reptile, mammal. Yes, when the baby first starts growing, it's a fish. And then it goes through the amphibian stage, and then the reptile stage, and then the mammal stage, farm, F-A-R-M. The presence of these fish-like structures in embryos shows these animals have evolved from fish. Notice the baby human looks identical to the baby fish. In the drawing, it's as if the embryo retains a memory of its origins. This is stuff kids are taught in school and have to be tested on. Sick mind Freud said this was his idea behind his theories. Oh yeah, man used to be, she's stuck in the fish stage or amphibian stage or reptile stage. Insane. Those are not gill slits. This is a lie number 12 in my series. Those little folds of skin on the baby that you see developing in the mother develop into bones in the ear and glands in the throat. Never have anything to do with breathing. Nothing. I've seen fat folks got 5 or 6 chins. They can't breathe through any of them except the top one. I can understand why Bill ran around. Never mind. Okay. Haeckel said the turning point in his thinking was when he read Charles Darwin's book. Darwin's book influenced Haeckel. By 1868, many evolutionists were worried about the lack of evidence for the theory. So Ernst Haeckel, one of those worried evolutionists, decided to manufacture some evidence. He made up some frauds. He created a family tree to prove evolution, but he was worried about the big gap between non-living and living organisms. I mean, to go from dust to anything alive, even a bacteria, is a giant, giant leap. So to complete the chart, Haeckel created some organisms. He called them a Monera. There is no Monera, no such thing. He claimed to have discovered these organisms in ocean mud samples. He named them Bathybius haeckeli in honor of Haeckel, a non-existent creature that he made up. 1876, a chemist, John Buchanan, revealed Huxley's discovery was simply calcium sulfate from seawater. Wasn't a half-living creature. He lied. Haeckel refused to admit his fraud and reprinted the Monera, the non-existing creatures, in his book. His fraud was continued with the attempt to prove the only difference between man and ape is that man can speak. He fraudulently created a missing link, Pithecanthropus alalis, the speechless ape man. He even went so far as to have artist Gabriel Marx draw up the man-made creature. Put him in a cave, half man, half monkey, from no evidence at all, none, zero. This is a lie. Haeckel reached an all-time low when he presented the biogenetic law, the idea that the baby has gill slits. He taught that each animal retraces the stages of its evolution. He took a drawing of a human and a dog embryo growing inside the mother and changed them and made them look exactly alike. On top are the real drawings. Underneath are his drawings. He lied. Now, Haeckel was a good artist, but Haeckel took drawings of all kinds of creatures in the embryonic stage and changed them to make them look alike to help prove the evolution theory. He lied. This is a lie, and the kids are still taught this today. On top are Haeckel's drawings compared to actual photographs of what he claimed he's drawing. His own university held a trial and said, Haeckel, you teach here, you are lying. University of Jena convicted him of fraud. And he said, a small percentage of my embryonic drawings are forgeries. Those, namely, for which the observed material is so incomplete and insufficient as to fill in and reconstruct the missing links by hypothesis and comparative synthesis. I should feel utterly condemned, but everybody else lies. That was his excuse. I know I lied, but it's okay because everybody lies. That was Ernst Haeckel at the University of Jena. Even though it was proven to be a fake in the late 1700s, Darwin continued to use it as the most important evidence for evolution. He said in his second book that he wrote, The Descent of Man, the human embryo itself at a very early period can hardly be distinguished from that of other members of the vertebrate kingdom. All that fraud stuff was brought to the public in 1911 in Haeckel's Frauds and Forgeries. The pictures were fakes. Why is this still in textbooks today in your town? George, check the Australian textbooks. Are they still teaching the embryo has gill slits? Proven wrong in 1874? I think it's time to get that out of there.
Yes, I remember being taught that at school.
Yep. It is a fake. It is a lie. Embryonic liar. A doctor from England did a study on that. Said, look, this is fake. This is just a lie. So he said the biogenetic law as proof for evolution is valueless. That was 50 years ago. They knew it wasn't true. The biogenetic law is so deeply rooted in biological thought, it cannot be weeded out. 1969, the year I got saved. 1988, they said the biogenetic law is as dead as a doornail. Haeckel was convicted of fraud at his own university, but they keep using the drawings. Here's the University of West Florida textbook in Pensacola 20 years ago. 2005 textbook in North Dakota, still using Haeckel's fake drawings. The exact drawings, same chart. So Haeckel, or Darwin published his book 1859. Haeckel faked his drawings in 1869. He was convicted of fraud in 1875, but they still teach him. Biology textbook from Holt, one of the top 4 publishers, still teaching. The young embryo that suggests evolution from a distant common ancestor because of the gill folds, gill slits, glycobiology. Tim Barra still teaching 115 years after it's teaching wrong. Tim, you ought to be embarrassed. You ought to be fired, okay? Here's Haeckel's fake drawings used in Kenneth Miller, who was a Catholic teacher in New England State, still teaching. We have gill slits. Kenneth, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. You are lying. Better go say 55 million Hail Marys full of grapes, swinging beads all over the place. Swing them low, swing them high. Come on, Mary, go, go, go. You are in trouble, son. Okay? It just frustrates me that these lies are still in the books. I mean, I collect them. They're sitting right here. Google it. Embryonic development. They're still teaching it. Human and fish embryos resemble each other because humans and fish share a common ancestor. That's a lie. Not true. So they make up this fake stuff. Now, here's why this is important, though. This idea that teaching the baby growing in the mother has gills and is therefore a fish. That means it's not human yet. So during the 9 months of development, it's okay to kill it because it hasn't reached the human stage yet. This is why this lie, proven wrong 130 years ago, is important because it justifies abortion. It all ties together. Gill slits. It's on the test the kids take for the SAT. You won't get a high score on your SAT unless you give a lie for an answer about gill slits. Just watch my video number 4. I got a ton of stuff on that if you want more on that. Let's see. So here's why it's important. Kent State University is still using it. I debated Rachel Oates in England. She said, I'm lying because no one is using gill slits as evidence for evolution. Rachel, you are way behind the times. 2017 textbook. Embryology, blogspot.com. Evolution with embryology at BioZoom. Evolution with embryology at Rational Conclusions. They're still using Haeckel's drawings. Why not use the photographs? They've been available for a long time, you know. Nope, still using Haeckel's drawings at SlideShare. Richard Peacock, still using it. All life forms have gill slits, tails, and anatomical structures. You guys are just either lying or stupid or evil. I can't figure it out. Gill slits. Encyclopedia Britannica, still teaching that. Embryology and evolutionary history, gill slits. I can update this today if you'd like, but it doesn't make any difference. They still use it as evidence. Embryonic development, evidence for evolution. This is, to me, one of the more serious lies, and I find it all over the internet, thousands of examples of it. Gill slits on the embryo, gill slits, gill slits, gill slits. They're just plain lying. Why? Well, they want to justify abortion. Evolution News. It said gill slits, yep. Yes, I really did an ultrasound guided abortion that made me pro-life. Yeah. One of my debates I did, do human embryos have gills? Ben Wagner, who claims he believes the Bible, Ben Wagner said, oh yeah, the baby has gill slits. Those are the folds of skin they're talking about as the embryo develops. They grow into bones in the ear and glands in the throat. Humans never have gills, and our gill slits don't normally open up the way fish gills do, but we definitely do have the same basic structures, pharyngeal arches, that go on to form gills in fish. We've just evolved to modify them for purposes other than extracting oxygen. Ben Wagner, I'll debate you again anytime, son. Half my brain tied behind my back. Bring it on, okay? You and the whole biology department in Arkansas. Okay? Bring every atheist you can find in Arkansas, every evolution. I get half the time. Professor Dave, I still teaching the embryo has evidence for evolution from homology. Dave, Get up to speed, son. You're about 130 or 40 years behind the times in your science. Those are not gill slits. All liars shall have their part in the lake of fire. This fires me up, this whole topic, because how many babies have been murdered? Somebody Google, how many kids have been killed by abortion?
Millions.
20 or 30 million, I think, just in America. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt not kill. Benjamin Spock, back in the 50s, and a lot of kids got spocked instead of spanked. But he said each child, as he develops, is retracing the whole history of mankind, physically and spiritually, step by step. The baby starts off in the womb as a single tiny cell, just the way the first living thing appeared in the ocean. Weeks later, in the amniotic fluid, he has gills like a fish. Now, Benjamin Spock said that 75 years after it was proven wrong. Dr. Spock. Gill slits, it's just all over the place in all the textbooks. By 7 months, the fetus looks like a normal human tiny baby, but it's not. How many?
Since 1972, 50 million.
Since 1972, 50 million. Is that just in America?
Yeah.
50 million. Since 1972.
Yeah. Wow.
It's a human at conception. The angel of the Lord said, behold, thou art with fetus. Is that what he said? No, I said, thou art with child. It's a child before it's born. Scott Peterson is accused of murdering his wife and unborn child. Oh, CNN, the communist news network, said it's an unborn child. You know why? Because California has a law, you can't get the death penalty unless you have 2 murders. So he murdered his wife, and the baby died resultant of that. So they said, oh, he murdered his wife and child. Well, Paula, you hypocrite. If somebody wanted to have an abortion, you wouldn't call it a child, would you? Scott Peterson found guilty of murdering his wife and son. Yeah. 34% of babies born at 5.5 months will survive. Probably higher now. That was back 20 years ago. You know, you're a nurse. Can you find out the stats? How many percentage? At 5.5 months along. I mean, 3.5 months before it ought to be born. They're still surviving.
Yeah, they're surviving.
34% of them.
It's probably close to 100% now.
Yeah.
Can a fetus live on its own? According to studies in 2003 and 2005, 20 to 30% of babies born at 24 weeks survive. It gives the stats here. There's a 21-week-old baby growing in the mother, holding the doctor's finger. Doctor did surgery on the baby before it was born. Cut into the uterus right there. Here's a 12-week embryo. It's a human. It doesn't have gill slits. That book, Icons of Evolution, covers it. They keep it in the textbooks. That's the only way to justify abortion. See, the population of the earth has grown from the time of Noah's flood, when 8 people got off the ark, to 6 billion people in the year 2000. The population growth curve is a great evidence that man has not been here for millions of years. But the goal of the New World Order is to reduce the population to 500 million. Anna Rosa's arm was chopped off in a botched abortion when her mother was 7.5 months pregnant. I lived in Pensacola for 30 years. We had the group come there, the National Organization of Wild Women. Now, and they had their shirts, choice above all, choice above all. Is this choice for the mother or choice for the baby? Does the dad get a choice in this? How about the grandparents? Do they get a choice in this? Do the neighbors get a choice? Tell you what, if you had a family that was killing their kids that were 2 and 3 years old next door to you, you could call the police, couldn't you? The neighbors have a choice in that, don't they? Why don't they have a choice in whether the neighbor aborts their unborn baby? Huh? Well, Peter Singer at Princeton University said we should be allowed to kill kids after they're born for the first month. Just decide if you want to keep it. How many of you mothers had a baby in the first couple of weeks you thought, this kid wakes me up in the middle of the night. Come on, knock it off, kid. I mean, yeah. I know parents with a kid that's 5 years old think about killing him once in a while. One more time, son, I'm going to abort you. Pro-choice. It's not pro-choice, it's pro-death. Media is ignoring the wishes of the minority, and this liberal paper missed the point purposely. Legislature pulls gun bill. Yeah. Kids were killed in Denver public schools. The public and Rosie O'Donnell jumped on the gun control issue. Hold it. The real issue is, should we have public schools, first of all? Okay. If we're going to have them, should we teach them evolution? That's what happened to Klebold and Eric Harris. They were strong believers in evolution. He said in a writing back and forth to his friend, He, talking about a football player, doesn't deserve the jaw evolution gave him. Look for his jaw. It won't be on his body. Dylan Klebold on the video he and Eric made prior to the shootings. Klebold's father was a geologist who believed in evolution. Both Eric and Dylan were followers of Nazi teachings. The shooting took place on Hitler's birthday on purpose. He had a shirt that said serial killer. They shot Isaiah just because he was black. And then they jump on the gun control issue. Blaming guns for Columbine is like blaming spoons for Rosie O'Donnell being fat. It's not the spoon's fault, Rosie, okay? And it's not the gun's fault either, okay? Should certain criminals be publicly executed? Maybe all law-abiding citizens should be required to carry guns. Maybe that's what we ought to think about. Proudly unarmed. Somebody sent me that pin. Would you wear that? What does that say to a criminal? Rob me. Proudly unarmed. Come on. Anyway, we can talk about all that. Here's the reasons they used to justify abortion. They're going to say it's not a human. That's a lie proven wrong in 1875. Try again. They say it's not viable. It can't live on its own. Neither are you viable stark naked on the North Pole, okay? Who's viable anyway? They say, well, child might be unwanted. I know a lot of kids that are unwanted. Doesn't mean we should allow to kill them. Anyway, this, they say it might be a financial burden. Show me a kid that's not. Is your daughter a financial burden?
All kids are.
Yeah. Might be from rape or incest. Well, that's 1%. And in that case, we should kill the rapist, not the baby. Insane. Anyway, so one of the lies in the textbooks that I am bothered by deeply is this one about the gill slits on the human embryo. I've gone long enough, but watch my video number 4. I cover about, I'm guessing 30 of the lies in the textbooks. There are probably at least 70. I should do more on that. I'm doing more with my Whackin' Atheist Wednesday night on my YouTube channel, Kent Hovind Official, with Mr. Larry Nelson, who calls himself Aaron Ra, the sun god. Having a lot of fun with that one. I can't wait for the next one. I've already got it ready. I was working on it today thinking, I wish it was tonight. The next Wednesday, we're going to smack them again. Okay. Anyway, so questions you guys got there. That's the kind of stuff we cover in our seminar. We believe the Bible is true. God made man in his own image, and it's murder to kill an unborn child. Okay?
Amen, brother. Amen. Well said. Fantastic presentation as always. And we've got a ton of great questions and feedback from the audience. Lots of positive comments towards you, Dr. Hovind. You've been such a blessing to so many. And personally, I recommend your creation seminar to everybody, as it changed my life years ago. I was a stubborn evolutionist coming out of college, but under the recommendation of my brother, who got saved through your work, I watched your seminar, including the famous lies in the textbook, which I could watch over and over again, and was surprised, Dr. Hovind, to realize I have been lied to all through grade school, high school, and college. So thank you so much for a fantastic presentation, Ken.
Thank you.
George, you may have a couple words before we get into some questions, brother.
Yeah. My experience was similar to yours, Stanley. I remember watching Dr. Ken Hovind debate those 3 professors, and I was gobsmacked, to be honest. I've never heard arguments like that. So thank you, Dr. Hovind.
Well, you're welcome. That was fun. Just type in "Where Did God Come From" by Kent Hovind. My 2-minute answer has got 70 million views.
Yeah,
I've seen that number of times. But there's somebody in the chat, Dr. Hovind, who brings up fossils and phylogeny a lot. But before we get to his question, I just want to read a very short excerpt that I took from a recent article. It's a press release from the American Museum of Natural History, okay? This sums up the gist of that review article. It was dated May the 6th, 2021, phys.org. I'm quoting here. It won't take long. Intriguingly, such narratives have not drastically changed since Darwin. We must be aware of confirmation biases and ad hoc interpretations by researchers aiming to confer their new fossil the starring role within a pre-existing narrative. Evolutionary scenarios are appealing because they provide plausible explanations based on current knowledge, but unless grounded in testable hypotheses, they are no more than just so stories.
Amen.
Overall, the researchers found that most stories of human origins are not compatible with the fossils that we have today. End quote.
Amen, brother. Amen. Well, then that would bring me to the first question, Dr. Hovind, where we've got a ton of questions. We've got a great lively chat tonight. So I'm going to take multiple questions and fuse them into one. Okay, so what are your thoughts in general, Kent, on phylogeny? Because the evolutionists will claim that we can classify organisms based on traits, morphology, genetics. Aaron Ra really likes to look to phylogeny as well. Does this actually demonstrate common descent?
Well, the fact that there are similarities between different organisms would demonstrate a common creator, wouldn't it? I think you'd find a lot of similarities between the Honda Prelude and the Honda Accord. What does that mean? They both evolved from a skateboard? No, they're coming from the same brains that are the same engineers designing them. So I think for God to create different creatures that have similarities is logical. I've got 2 arms. A lot of creatures have 2 arms. Well, that's pretty handy to be able to hold things and grab things. 3 would be a little uncomfortable. You couldn't get your shirt on. So I think it's evidence for design, not common ancestor at all. If somebody chooses to believe that, that's a religious choice, not a scientific choice.
Amen. Amen, Kent. Well said. Well said. Well, this brings me to this question, and this is, I'm sure you're familiar with this throughout, your hundreds of debates, essentially. But does natural selection help the evolutionists at all in terms of driving large-scale evolution?
Well, natural selection only selects. It can't create anything. If you said, we're going to let all the horses run across the field, and anybody that runs across the field too slow, we're going to shoot them, okay? And so you gradually shoot the slow horses. Eventually, you end up with a herd of horses that are fast runners. Now, okay, you have selected speed for what survives in that case. And so then you only crossbreed the fast runners, and pretty soon you realize, wow, I got all fast runners, but they don't ever get up to 1,000 miles an hour. I mean, you're not creating anything new. You're selecting something already in the gene code. If you went to a country and said, we want everybody here to be over 6 feet tall, so you shoot everybody under 6 feet tall and only let those that are over 6 foot breed. Okay, well, after a few hundred years of that, you'll have a bunch of 6-footers, but you'll never get 30-footers. It's not in the gene code. You're not selecting. Selection doesn't create. See, the evolutionist gets it all screwed up in their little brain. They think selection can create something. No, it can select. That's all it can do.
Amen. Well said. And as we know, Kent, then what they look to is mutations. And Aaron Ra looked to this recently in one of his videos that you demolished in such a perfect way in your last Whack an Atheist. That was so good, and I recommend it for everybody. So they'll look to mutations as a way to generate novel genetic information and complexity, as Aaron Ra puts it. Does the science support this claim, Dr. Hovind, along with natural selection, of course, which you just addressed? But can mutations drive large-scale fish-to-fisherman evolution? Absolutely not.
Mutation is a scrambling, something goes wrong in the gene code. Some child is born with a mutation, like no arms, or no legs, or something, or blind, or something like that. All known mutations are harmful or fatal or neutral. They do nothing. If you had a beneficial mutation, and nobody's ever proven one, but if there was a beneficial mutation, now you got to get another one in the opposite sex at the same time, in the same place. It's a big world, and they got to find each other and be interested. And then they got to take over the whole population of people. So in the evolutionist little bitty brain, they think a mutation happens, drives an animal a little better than the rest. Okay? Well, now the rest of them have to die. See, this is such a fundamental difference. The Bible says man brought death into the world. Evolution says death brought man into the world. Trillions of creatures that weren't quite well formed enough had to die, and here we are. We made it. We're the king of the world. It's what Hitler said to, Satan said to Eve. You do what I say, honey, and ye shall be as gods. That's what evolution, it's the same thing. It's a lie from the devil. It's all it is. So no, mutations, nobody's proven a good one. Nobody. If there were one, you got to take over the whole population with this one. It just is it's a fairy tale. They believe it. Okay, I don't care if you believe it, but it's not science. Nobody's ever seen that happen. Okay, go ahead.
Amen. Well said. And I like to point out, Dr. Hovind, that it's even worse for the evolutionists in terms of mutations, because even the so-called neutral mutations are slightly deleterious. And I like to compare it to rust on a car. Those mutations build up and degenerate. So they're not going to take a single-celled like ancestor into a whale over billions of years through information loss. As you put it, Kent, quite frequently, and I really like it, we are a copy of a copy of a copy of Adam. It's lucky that we could function at all.
Right.
George, actually, I'll go to this question, and then George, I know you got a couple questions, because this one's still related to selection mutations. I'm sure you've heard it over and over again, Kent. They will then say, well, we've got gene duplication. Gene duplication can add meaningful information, and then selection can act upon that duplicated gene, and then we can get something novel. Is there any truth to this?
Well, what they're talking about is called polyploidy. That instead of, certain chromosome just makes an exact copy of itself. So if I said, I'm going to give you this book, no, better yet, I'm going to give you 7 copies of this book. It's the same information 7 times. So no new information is added with polyploidy. Gene duplication is simply a doubling of the existing information. It's not going to help anything. So they're dreaming. They think that's going to cause evolution.
And then in those additional copies of the book that you already own, Kent, if you started introducing spelling mistake into those additional copies, you're only going to get a worse off book than the original book. So once again, it's still downhill.
Yep.
George, brother, I know you had a couple questions as well that you wanted to get to. So go ahead.
Yeah, I thought it was important to let Dr. Hovind know about some of the comments that are coming through. Since he spent some time on Haeckel's drawings, I found it interesting that cover-to-cover book reviews, that's one of the subscribers in the chat at the moment, said, standing for truth, my niece was being taught in school about Haeckel's embryo drawings. She stood up in front of the entire class and refuted Haeckel's claims using your information. Thanks, Dr. Hovind. I thought it was important for you to know that.
Well, now hold it, George. Why are we sending kids off to war? The parents ought to be fighting this battle. Get that stuff out of your textbooks. Kids should be able to read the book and trust it. The parents choose the books. Somebody's picking that book. It's a battle the parents ought to be fighting. Praise God for the kids standing up, but it's sad that it got that far.
Correct, Dr. Hovind. My daughter's actually a microbiologist. She's involved in research. And I actually quizzed her a couple of times about whether she knew anything about soft tissues in dinosaurs. And she goes, no, that's impossible. She goes, they died out 65 million years ago. And I said, you better read up on it. So they're not being told a lot of these truths that we're finding. But a question that came in from Raman Goiza Dango, this is something that I keep reading too. He says, why are their story is changing to local catastrophe everywhere instead of super long time deposition? I think he's talking about all the stories of local flooding instead of one super long flood.
Well, people don't like the idea of a worldwide flood because that obviously demonstrates that God has authority to destroy his creation if he wants. In 2 Peter 3, it says the scoffers will be willingly ignorant of the creation. They don't want to admit God created it because that would mean he owns it, and that would mean he could make the rules, and they don't like his rules, like the thou shalt not kind of stuff, They don't want to admit there was a flood because that demonstrates God has authority to judge his creation. So they'll say, oh, yeah, we had a local flood here in South Carolina. We also had one in North Carolina. We had another one in Tennessee and another one in Georgia and another one in, the whole world shows evidence of a flood. I mean, it's all over the place. You find petrified trees standing up. I got pictures of those. 1088. Petrified trees standing up, running through all these layers. They're telling the kids the layers are different ages. How long does a dead tree stand around in your neighborhood before it falls over? 4 or 5 years? Polystrata fossils. They find them all over the world. Petrified me by one in Yellowstone, standing up, petrified in the vertical position. the layers had to form quickly. So the local catastrophe idea is crazy. They find petrified clams in the closed position on top of Mount Everest. I think maybe there was a worldwide flood. Now, I don't think the water was over Mount Everest. This is a critical difference. Mount Everest was under the water. The Bible says in Psalm 104, toward the end of the flood, the mountains arose, the valleys sank down. If the earth was covered with water and the crust of the earth was cracked up like an eggshell, the plates of the earth would still be shifting around and moving from water underneath, escaping along the cracks. Then a plate of earth the size of Texas would tip a mile, and the water would run down into the low spot, make a mountain range here and a low spot here. All the mountain ranges in the world follow the coastlines. Rocky Mountains follow the North Pacific. Appalachians follow the North Atlantic. The Andes Mountains follow the South Pacific. Why do all the mountain ranges follow the coastlines? They were formed at the same time from the same thing. It's the crust of the earth shifting around and the water being reshuffled. Now 71% of the earth is underwater and some of it's above water. Praise God. That's where I live.
Great answer. Great response, Dr. Hovind. That brings me to the next question here that's related to the flood. Now that we're kind of moving on to the flood, the question is there too much coal and oil today to explain in just 6,000 years? I know you've addressed this many times, Kent, but it's still an argument that is being put forth by the atheists over and over again.
Well, here's a picture of a coal mine. I've been to many, many coal mines. I've got a lot of friends that work there. They send me samples of coal, the different types, anthracite, bituminous, subbituminous, lignite, etc. I'm very familiar with this. I taught her science 15 years. One lady I debated said there's so much coal in the world. If you took every tree and blade of grass in the world and pressed it and heated it and turned it into coal, you couldn't make all the coal we find in the world today. I said, that's right. She said, see, that proves it takes millions of years. I said, no, that proves the world before the flood was very different. God created it to be inhabited. Today, it's 71% underwater, where no trees are growing. If the pre-flood world was, let's just pick a number and say it was 90% land and 10% water, because the water was trapped under the crust of the earth. He founded the earth upon the seas. So for the first 1,600 years of Earth's history, it was loaded with trees. We know the trees were much bigger because they find fossils of them that are just ginormous, you know. So the world was very different before the flood. That's the world that perished. And so the coal would have formed in the flood because the pre-flood world was loaded. If the moon's pulling the water up and the earth is turning at this latitude, 886 miles an hour, that means the water's rushing in sideways at 886 miles an hour. Well, that would knock all the trees down and bury them under a layer of mud 100 feet thick in 30 seconds and form coal over the next 20 years. They can make coal in the laboratory in 20 minutes. Take a piece of wood under heat and pressure, you can change it to coal in 20 minutes. Does not take millions of years. So if it's buried deeper and deeper under thousands of feet of rock, how much would 1,000 feet of rock weigh? A lot. And it would squeeze the layers into different types of coal, anthracite, bituminous, etc. So the coal formed because of the pre-flood world getting buried. So yeah, there is more coal out there in the world today than we could possibly form today. That does not prove it took millions of years. That proves the pre-flood world was different. That's all it proves. It had a lot more trees to bury. Okay?
Well, that's a great, I'll say this, George, and then I'll hand it over to you because so many great points there. And it makes me think about this argument that evolutionists use. They claim that there's too much heat that would have been generated as a result of the flood for the flood to be true. But based on what you're saying, Kent, I have a feeling that a lot of the heat would have been absorbed in the rapid production of coal, natural gas, and oil. There would have been essentially a canceling out effect. What are your thoughts on that, Ken?
Well, it would be canceled out many different ways. One is with the rocks and stuff absorbing this heat. But if the earth indeed had a canopy above, like I strongly believe, I covered that in video number 2, there was water above the firmament. Talks about in Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2. There was actually a couple, the Jews have always taught it was a layer of ice 2 or 3 fingers thick. So a couple inches of ice, pick a number, say 10 miles up. The whole earth is encased inside a crystalline ball of ice, super cold ice, maybe 10 miles off the surface. Well, super cold ice is magnetic. You get ice down cold enough, it becomes magnetic. The molecules actually rearrange. The hydrogen-oxygen molecules rearrange and it becomes laminate. Hydrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, oxygen. You can hit it with a hammer and it spreads out. You can beat it like gold. It's malleable. That's another long story. I cover in video too. But if the crust of the earth broke open and shot stuff up and cracked that canopy, as it begins to rain, you get a problem where it releases heat called the latent heat of condensation. I understand. So the atmosphere would heat up from the rain. But if the air is able now to expand away from the earth from 10 miles out to its current 60 miles, just the expansion of the air would absorb the heat. Get a spray can of anything, spray paint, hairspray, and hold the button down. It'll get cold in your hand. As the pressure is relieved, it gets cooled off. So I think the cooling effect of the expanding atmosphere, and also, like you mentioned, the turning trees into coal absorbs a lot of heat. All the just the pressure would be a lot of factors to study on that. I don't think it's logical to reject the biblical view of a flood because somebody can't figure out where the heat went. I think that's insane.
Great response. I completely agree. Kent, great answer. George, I apologize. I know you were going to say something earlier. George, the floor is yours, brother.
That's okay. I was just going to add to what Kent was saying about the coal. We know with carbon dating, it's all based around the C14 to C12 ratio. They assume, the secular scientists assume that that ratio has remained constant, but based on what Kent has mentioned regarding all the coal, the oil, the gas that's stored in the earth, that C14 to C12 ratio would have been much, much different in the past. And hence the ages that they get for these carbon dating samples is completely out of whack. And that could explain a lot of these dates that we get that are 50-odd thousand years, 40-odd thousand years, and so forth. So that's what I wanted to add to that discussion.
I appreciate that, George. Did you? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm curious. Carbon 14, is that similar to carbon 14? 14. Go ahead.
Laughter.
You guys had to have our help to win the war. That's why, right there.
I gotta say, laughter is the best medicine, and listening to you, Kent, is going to keep me living forever.
I hope so.
Maybe to 900, like our father Adam. Actually, okay, George, did you have a question, brother?
Yeah, there was a question from Landon Freeman, but you may have to help me up with the pronunciation of some of these words. He says some kinds have more genetic variability than others. Example, the harvestman, that's singular, kind, is relegated to harvestmen, plural, alone, though the armadillo kind also includes the huge glyptodont.
So it looks like his question is, I'm looking at it here in the side chat, Dr. Hovind, and essentially he's asking, do some biblical kinds have more genetic variability than others? Maybe the potential to change more?
Probably. There are 7,500 varieties of apples that have been developed now. And they might have had a common ancestor called an apple. Most of that is done by man trying to create a special breed for some special climate or special, soil or whatever. Maybe they want it to be sweeter or more juice, or farmers do this kind of stuff. They've been raising cows for more and more milk. Well, pretty soon they get cows that give a whole lot of milk. It's just utterly ridiculous how much they can give. But they can barely walk. They wouldn't survive 20 minutes out in the woods. You got to babysit the herd now and keep everybody away from it. So yes, variations certainly happen. Some species seem to have more genetic variations available, but that's just a gene code thing. How many varieties can they get? I covered that a couple nights ago, 2 nights ago, Whack an Atheist, on the different varieties of. There are 60 some varieties of oak trees. Okay, they might have had a common ancestor called an oak. 195 varieties of chickens. And they might have had a common ancestor. Some lay more eggs, some have more meat. Again, the further you get away from the norm, the more problems you have in some other area. Those that can lay a whole lot of eggs don't live very long, and you got to feed them like crazy, and they got health problems. You got to give them, medicine all the time. Doesn't happen in nature. That would never happen.
Well said, Dr. Hovind. I watched that Whack an Atheist night, and you did a great job. So I recommend everybody check that out. And I'm going to start winding it down here with these last couple questions because, as always with you, Kent, time flies by, and we are already over the hour mark. So I want to get this one in here because it's directly related to your Lies in the Textbook series. And the question is, evolutionists now claim that vestigial organ simply means lost its original function, or simply co-opted a new function, but still claim vestigial organs are real. They're still using that argument. What's the best way to respond to that, Ken?
Well, I think vestigial organs is they say something you don't need anymore. Well, is that how evolution works? You keep losing things until you have it all? I got a couple things on my van with 175,000 miles that don't work anymore. Okay, that's kind of normal, isn't it? 175,000 miles on. Yeah, so I think vestigial structures is a lousy evidence for evolution because they're saying, oh, yes, we keep losing things until we have it all. Those guys ought to run for Congress. They could help them borrow their way out of debt.
Yes, if we lose enough money, we'll get rich. Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
I was wondering if you know if the University of Jena, where Ernst Haeckel went, is using that.
Good point. Is University of Jena in Germany still using Haeckel's drawings?
Yeah.
Wow. Google that and see, bro. That'd be cool.
It's pretty sad that they're still using these arguments, even though they've been refuted so many years ago, as you've pointed out, Kent. Even one of the questions here has to do with an argument they're still using. I'm curious as to your thoughts. They're still claiming the existence of junk DNA. They say that most of our genome has no function, no known function, and therefore, why would God create genomes of evolutionary leftovers? Is there any validity to this whole junk DNA argument, Kent?
The more people understand about DNA, the more research they do, the less junk DNA there is. It keeps that's what it does. Tell you what, put a 7-year-old under the hood of your car and say, take out anything this doesn't need. He doesn't understand what none of it does. He'd take it all out. The fact that we don't understand it yet doesn't mean it's junk DNA. I would be willing to bet there is no junk DNA. They just haven't learned the use for it yet. Sometimes there's redundancy because if something breaks, the new one takes the place right away. Why do you have a spare tire in your car? Is that junk? No, you may get a flat tire. So some of the DNA is for instant repair. You get something damaged. Wow, it's right there to fix it. So I'd say there's no evidence that there's no proof that there's junk DNA at all.
Amen. I completely agree. The evolutionists would look to something like a spare tire as being useless, but as you pointed out, it's essential. It's beneficial if you get a flat tire. Redundancy is good design. Okay, George, did you have a final question here before we start winding it down? I do want to point out to the audience that I know we've got a ton of questions. We've had a big chat tonight, but we did have Dr. Hovind on 2 months ago for a presentation on the Garden of Eden and as well an audience Q&A. So a lot of these questions I see in the side chat, we answered in that show. So please check that out as well after this. I apologize. Go ahead, George.
Yeah. Coming from an engineering background, I've actually studied computer science as well, and I've written numerous programs for design of structural beams, etc. A lot of my programs contain tables and tables and tables of information. Now, a person who's not aware of my program would look at those tables of information and think it was just junk. It wasn't doing anything, but it's very important because the program makes decisions based on the information that's in those tables. So this question of the junk DNA, I mean, we don't understand probably, well, I think we understand about 1 to 3% of what our DNA actually does, or our genome does. So how can they claim that it's junk when they don't understand the physics and the intricacies of the genome? I think as we go through the process of examining and finding out more and more about the genome, we'll find that less and less of that so-called junk is actual junk. And I agree with Kent. I reckon they'll find out that it's probably zero or close to zero. Maybe if it's not zero, it's because some of it has been mutated to the point where it doesn't do much.
Well said, George. I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody in the audience. I appreciate all your support, your super stickers, your super chats, and lots of kind words towards you, Kent. Once again, I want to thank you so much for being generous with your time. We're now going on an hour and 10 minutes. Been a great presentation, great audience Q&A. I want to hand it over to you, Dr. Hovind, if you had some final words, anything else you wanted to get out pertaining to the topic.
Well, none of this matters if you're going to hell. You can believe in creation, believe the Bible, believe the flood story, and not accept Jesus Christ. Many people are going to be Bible scholars in hell. They knew their Bible well, but they didn't accept the payment that God made. 52 years ago, someone said, Kent, are you going to heaven? I said, I don't know. I've been baptized, catechized, circumcised, homogenized, pasteurized. What else you got to do? They said, you ever sinned? I said, well, yeah. I said, well, then you're going to hell. I said, no, wait a minute. Isn't God going to put my good against my bad and see which is, They said, what judge on earth would do that? If you murdered somebody and your defense was, Judge, it's true I murdered that guy, but look at all the people I didn't murder. Is that a good defense? No. If you committed one sin, you deserve to die and go to hell. So my friend said, Kent, you deserve to die and go to hell. And he showed me from the Bible, the wages of sin is death. And that Jesus Christ died for you. And if you're willing to accept his payment, you can be forgiven. So 52 years ago, I said, Lord, I'm a sinner. All the angels in heaven said, amen to that. Lord, I believe you died for me, and I'd like you to forgive me and save me. And I would like you to come live in my heart. And something changed in Kent Hovind that day. I got born again. There's two of me in here. They fight all the time. I got the old one that loves to sin and the new one that hates to sin, and they fight all the time.
Amen.
So if you're not having that fight inside, you're probably not saved. Okay. So you can ask the Lord to save you. Come on down. Call us. 855-BIG-DINO is our phone number. 855-BIG-DINO. I'm extension 3. I take calls all day long and half the night. I shut it off when I get to go to sleep.
Kent, if you're interested, there are some really good images, sonar images of those trees in Spirit Lake in the standing position.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, Mount St. Helens blew all those trees in there. A lot of them began floating in the upright position and slowly sank to the bottom. They're going to petrify standing up.
Yes, and Steve Austin has actually done some sonar images of that lake, and you can clearly see the trees in the vertical position, completely buried.
All right.
Now, I'd like to sort of give you one of my final jokes here, Ken.
Okay.
Did you know the history of boy bands proves the theory of evolution? They all descended from the monkeys.
Ah, the boy band.
Well, that's a good place to end it on a good note, and well said, Dr. Hovind. Great final words. I always point out that's great evidence that you are saved if you have that war between the old man and the new man, the flesh and the spirit going on, because as Christians, that's a struggle every single day. So well said, Dr. Hovind. This was a great stream. Once again, I appreciate you giving us your time. And I know you got a boot camp coming up as well, so I'll be praying for that, brother. And thank you to the audience. Thank you, George. Standing for Truth is out. God bless everybody. All right. Looks like we are live and we are ready to dismantle some uniformitarianism and evolutionism, guys. We have Dr. Kent Hovind with us again tonight for this extremely important discussion. I am pumped. I think I can speak for all of us here when I say that we are incredibly thankful for all the amazing work Kent Hovind has done to defend the faith. Now, I want to point out, though, this isn't Kent's first time here on this channel. As a matter of fact, he has been generous enough to give us his time about 15 times. I've got a playlist titled Dr. Kent Hovind on Standing for Truth, where everybody can find all the debates and interviews Kent has had with us. Kent, I have been blown away by how well you demolish evolution in your many, many debates over the years. I'm curious, and actually, Dr. Hovind, you're muted, so to answer this question, you might want to unmute yourself. But I'm curious, how many debates have you had roughly in total?
226 by my count. And I'm open for any more. Tell all the atheists, give me a call. 855-BIG-DINO, extension 3. I'll take them all on same time.
It's getting harder and harder to find opponents. I'll tell you that much. Kent, you must be coming close to setting a record, it seems, on debates.
Well, no, Dwayne Gish did many more than that. I think well over 300.
Wow.
And yeah, I'd love to do more, but would you want to defend the idea that we all came from a rock, which came from a dot of nothing for no reason?
No.
Okay,
No.
well, that's why they don't want to either.
It'd be an impossible win. Okay, so anyways, enough for me. I'm going to hand it over to Brother George here for a brief introduction before we get into a short presentation by Dr. Hovind on the Garden of Eden and the global flood of Noah, which will be followed up by questions from us and, of course, our awesome audience. So please, guys, make sure you're tagging me with your questions. As always, we want to make this as interactive as possible. So, Brother George, go ahead. Take it away.
Thank you, SFT. Dr. Hovind, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you and another stalwart, an Australian by the name of John McKay.
Uh-huh.
Is there a bit of an echo there?
Sounds fine here.
Yeah, you sound good.
Okay, I'll continue on. Well, we had John McKay about a month ago on this channel, and I would like to thank both of you for opening my eyes on the evolution topic. I was a theistic evolutionist. I was, like everyone else, trying to accept and combine the so-called science of evolution and my faith in Jesus. I recall one of the very first videos I watched was a debate you had on evolution. I was gobsmacked, to be honest. I had never heard those arguments before. Now, fast track 11 years later, and after countless videos, documentaries, books, I have some of your books, science papers, etc. And now I get to talk to you, and I want to thank you personally. A little plug. Dr. Hovind has some excellent material from videos to books. Ones I recommend amongst many others. I actually read these yesterday. Are You Being Brainwashed? And Help, I'm Being Taught Evolution in My Biology Class. This has an actual case where Dr. Hovind tutored a student by the name of Amy, actually two students, on how to deal with the education system and biology teacher in general. But before we get into your presentation, I would like to introduce you to a theory of mine. It's similar to the moon is made up of green cheese theory. I haven't actually tabled it in any science papers, but stay with me and you'll see where I'm going with this. In my example, it involves dinosaurs and chickens. Of course, we've all heard the plethora of theories on how the dinosaurs went extinct. We've heard of the flatulence, the asteroids, the climate change, the ozone layer, depletion, etc., etc. But here's how my theory involves the chickens. I believe dinosaurs went extinct because they tasted too much like chickens.
People sounds good to me.
People took a liking to chicken soup, roast chicken, fried chicken, barbecue chicken, and that's why dinosaurs went extinct. Okay. Now,
George, I got an idea. Why don't you apply to your government for a grant for $40 million to study that?
Sounds like a great idea. I think I'll do that.
They would probably grant it.
Now, for the benefit of those, I told you a little joke before we went on stream, but I'll tell it again because the audience haven't heard us. But I actually proved to Dr. Hovind how we can prove evolution wrong. This is how it goes. Everyone's heard of hummingbirds, right? Well, hummingbirds have existed for millions of years and they haven't learnt the words yet. So that proves evolution wrong.
That's right.
Okay, after that failed attempt at humour, I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Hovind. I'm sure your jokes are better than mine, much better, actually.
No, I loved it. That was great. I'm going to use that one. Well, thank you. It's an honor to be on the program again. I've been on here a couple of times, and I enjoy it. My name's Ken Hovind. I live in Lenox, Alabama, population 35. We are straight north of Pensacola, 70 miles, and we are building a dinosaur adventure land, a theme park, museum, science center, all based on science and the Bible. We want to give God the glory. The Bible says very clearly in the very first chapter, God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters. Well, what on earth is a firmament? I'll show you in a minute. And let it divide the waters from the waters. Some people say, hey, if it divides the water from the water, it must be the dirt, because that keeps the water away from the water. No, no, no. Keep reading, verse 20. Let the birds, the fowl, fly above the earth in the open firmament. So there it tells us the firmament is the air. And God said there would be lights in the firmament, and he made the stars. That is the second heaven. There's actually a third heaven mentioned in the Bible. Paul said he was caught up to the third heaven, 2 Corinthians. So Bible talks about the heavens, plural, declare the glory of God. There's more than one heaven, but that's another story. On my video series, I have 18 hours you get for $50 from drdino.com. Video number 2 is all about the Garden of Eden. What was it like? Number 1 is called The Age of the Earth, how to prove the earth is not billions of years old. Number 2 is all about the Garden of Eden. What was it like? Why did they live to be 900? I won't take an hour and a half to cover here like I did there, but you can get that video if you want more. So let me skip up to where I believe there was a crystalline canopy of ice, a couple inches thick, maybe 10 miles above the earth, giving the earth an even temperature everywhere. You could live at the North Pole or South Pole. It was even temperature everywhere. And the Bible says the earth was standing out of the water and in the water. So there was water above the crust, above the air, I believe. And some creationists don't believe what's called the canopy theory. They're wrong. I'm right. Okay. So very simple. Let me get through some of the stuff I cover on my. But this canopy above the atmosphere would do several things. Today's air is about 60 miles thick or over the earth. If you squeezed it down to maybe 10 miles, put a ball over the top. I used to have a glass ball here somewhere, but like the snow globe they shake. If you increase the air pressure, maybe just 5 or 10%, and increase the oxygen concentration, the air bubbles they find in amber are 32% oxygen. The air we're breathing right now is 21%. Well, if we were breathing 32% oxygen under slightly higher pressure, just breathing would be exciting. And you would live much longer, be much healthier, and you could run for hundreds of miles, never get tired. Things were very different in that pre-flood world. All that was destroyed. Today, we have an atmosphere that stretched out about 50 or 60 miles. But if you go up a couple different places in there, you have what's called a heat sink where it gets really cold, like 100 below zero. So the ice canopy theory is that there was ice above the atmosphere, blocking out UV light, making them live a long time. A couple inches of ice would block out ultraviolet light, X-rays would be from the sun, which is some of those things damage your skin. It could have been held up like an inflatable building roof is. Just simple air pressure would hold it up. They make some ginormous inflatable buildings. You only need just a little bit of increase, in 5 or 10% increase to hold the roof up. A cubic foot of inch of ice weighs about 5 pounds per square foot. So just increasing the air pressure a little bit from 14.7 to 14.707 would hold up a couple inches of ice like a big inflatable building. Or maybe the magnetic field held it up. We cover all this on our video number 2. But I want to tell you what the Garden of Eden was like in Hovind theory. The creationists, yeah, there we go. Thank you, man. Thank you, sir. The Christians have always taught that there was something above the firmament. This is Josephus about the time of Christ. He said when God made the earth, it's crystal globe here, snow globe. It says he set the heaven above the universe, surrounding it with ice. The Jews have taught he placed a crystalline firmament around it, and it was 3 fingers thick, so a couple inches. This guy said the thickness of the firmament is 2 fingers. Well, I'm sure they argued about that and started the church of the 2 fingers and the church of the 3 fingers. You know, Jews argue about everything. So it doesn't matter. There was a thin layer of ice up there, a couple inches thick, a flat and solid surface. You can watch my video number 2 to get much more on this. But I think what this would do, there was also water under the crust of the earth. Today, most of the earth is uninhabitable. 70% of the earth is underwater. Oh, get my globe here. 70% of the earth is underwater, A lot of the rest of it is ice caps or deserts or uninhabitable. About 3% of the surface of the earth is habitable for mankind. The Bible says when he first made the earth, he established it upon the floods. The water that's now on the surface was in the crust of the earth. Psalm 33, he layeth up the depth in storehouses. He stretched out the earth above the water, Psalm 136. So I think the Garden of Eden conditions that Adam and Eve lived under would be a crystalline canopy above, couple inches, maybe 10 miles up, layer of air to breathe that was richer in oxygen and slightly greater pressure, then a crust of the earth to stand on, maybe 8 or 10 miles, and then water under the crust of the earth. It was the water under the crust that came shooting to the surface when the fountains of the deep broke open. So most of the flood water came from inside the earth. It didn't come from rain. The water shooting out the earth still today has cracks all over the place. Fault lines are called. And so I think that's where the water came shooting out. And as it shoots out, the crack would get wider from simple friction and erosion. And so 10 miles of rock on top of the water would put nearly 60,000 pounds per square inch. So that would probably launch rocks out into space. You have reach escape velocity and launch them out. We may still be hitting stuff that was launched off the earth from the flood, rocks flying around through space. It's interesting, the moon has two different sides to it, from the side we see and the side we can't see, but the spaceships go back there and say, wow, the far side of the moon is very different. Lots of smaller craters. Well, I think the near side was blasted straight from the fountains of the deep breaking open, and the other side was small stuff being drawn in by moon's gravity, which is pretty weak. So the smaller stuff would come in and make a smaller hole. Anyway, there are craters all over the earth now. I don't think it was that way in the Garden of Eden. It was a perfect world. And so we cover all this in video number 2, about the wrinkled mountains and all that stuff. Let me get up to where I need to go. I got so much material here. So I think what the Bible says, the scoffers in the last days would be willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood. The two main events and the coming judgment. And 2 Peter chapter 3 talks about that. But the scoffers are ignorant. What was that creation like? When God first made the earth, it was very different. Let me get up to right here. It had this canopy overhead that would increase air pressure, give them richer oxygen. I think the earth was probably not tilted over 23.5 degrees. It was the same all the time. 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of darkness. And they find dinosaur bones at the South Pole. Well, reptiles couldn't live down there now. We got a 100-pound tortoise here at our Dinosaur Adventureland. When it gets below about 40, 50 degrees, he goes in his house where the heat lamp is. They don't want it to be cold. They want to stay warm. They can't maintain their body heat. But fossils of dinosaurs are found at the South Pole. Well, that's because I think it was nice and warm at one time. They got a new theory that maybe a lack of oxygen killed the dinosaurs. Oxygen deprivation caused dinosaur extinction. Oh, yeah, they died from no oxygen, right? They've discovered they have small nostrils and small lungs. 80-foot Apatosaurus, this article said, had nostrils the same size as a horse. Well, how's an 80-foot animal going to get enough air through nostrils the size of a horse's nostrils? He couldn't today. But dinosaurs lived. We find the bones of them all over the world. The giant Spinosaurus, 50 feet long, with little tiny nostrils. How did he breathe? 33-foot dinosaur fossil found in the Sahara Desert. When they drill down to get oil, which they do all over the world, they find all kinds of fossils all over the world. Fossils are found. Even human graveyards found in the Sahara. The Sahara used to be a beautiful place to live. I think it got destroyed by the flood, and then later just simply the climate change made things dry out. So we cover a lot of material. The amber air bubbles found in amber. Maybe you saw the movie Jurassic Park. And by the way, if I'm going too long, just stop me, brother. I can go for hours on this. Just say, okay, hold for next guy's turn. Air bubbles found in amber, which is petrified tree sap or hardened tree sap, oftentimes have 32% oxygen. Now, wait a minute. 50% more oxygen than it does today, this article says from Time magazine. Fossil, they found it had 32% oxygen. Today, we're breathing 21. I believe those air bubbles in amber were from the samples of the air from before the flood. During the flood, the trees would get busted up all over the place, and the sap would ooze out, and they would trap samples of pre-flood atmosphere. So that's probably what they're breathing. The only trend is they had far more oxygen than we imagine. So if you lived in a world with more oxygen, more air pressure, and could live to be 900, like the Bible says, the reptiles would get to be ginormous. This guy said, 80 million years ago, it was 50% richer in oxygen than today. Interesting. It wasn't 80 million years ago. Analysis of the gas of these bubbles show that it was 35% oxygen compared to 21%. Geology.com. See, under double atmospheric pressure, not only does your hemoglobin take on oxygen, your plasma in your blood will get oxygen saturated, which means you could literally run for hundreds of miles. You wouldn't get tired. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, they're using it at hospitals all over the place. High pressure oxygen. We've got a small hyperbaric chamber here where you get in there. Our zipper's broken right now, but you can get in there and zip it up to and get 1.5% atmosphere, 1.5 atmospheres, and breathe pure oxygen. And after an hour in there, you feel like getting out and going jogging. It's amazing what hyperbaric therapy does. Jessica fell down in the well in Texas back in '87. She was, 2 years old? She was down there for 2.5 days. It took a miracle to get her out of there. When they finally got her out, they were going to cut off her right leg because it was totally black from lack of circulation. One doctor said, hey, put her in a hyperbaric chamber. Let's try it. They put her in a hyperbaric chamber and her right leg was saved. They had to amputate half of her little toe instead of her whole right leg. There she is a year later at the White House. So there's plenty on the internet about hyperbaric chambers. I think the whole earth was hyperbaric. West Germany sends all stroke patients for hyperbaric treatment. Get great recovery results from strokes. In England, they treat multiple sclerosis. In France, they treat arthritis and all kinds of diseases from hyperbaric chambers, high pressure oxygen. Sweden is treating gangrene. India treats leprosy with hyperbaric chambers. So on my video number 2 of my series, you can get the whole thing for $50 at drdino.com, 855-BIG-DINO, extension 1. See, I want to get a set of those tapes. If you get 2 sets, you get a third one free to give one away to somebody, $50 a set. So they're treating autism, neurological disorders. Hyperbaric therapy is growing all over the world. It works for just about everything. Well, now, what if the whole world was hyperbaric? All these pro teams have a hyperbaric chamber because healing time is twice as fast. They heal faster. Get them back out there playing with the ball. NFL athletes use hyperbaric chamber to accelerate healing. Some people have their own private chamber. They're expensive, but hey, if you make a bunch of money playing with the ball, go buy your own chamber. So these guys, the minor accidents are treated. There's a giant one, holds 30 people at a time, big hyperbaric chamber. This is similar to what we have, a hyperbaric sleeping bag. My son and his wife and I went to an oxygen bar in Alaska where you pay $5 while you're eating and breathe pure oxygen. And you feel like going shopping again. It's a conspiracy, I can tell you that right now. A friend of mine put me in his hyperbaric chamber in Oregon. He said, want to try it, Brother Hovind? I said, yeah. After an hour in there under double atmospheric pressure, I felt like going jogging. It was amazing, just simple, increasing oxygen. So I cover in my video series, I think the Garden of Eden conditions were very different. They were protected from most of the harmful effects of the sun, had increased air pressure. Plants would grow like crazy. Dr. Kimori at the University in Japan started raising his tomato plants in his basement, and all he had to get light to the plants was fiber optic cable coming off the roof. He was in a basement apartment with no windows. The fiber optic cable, he did not realize at the beginning, was stripping out the harmful effects of the light and showering the plants with pure light. You can get the website himawari-net.co.jp to read all about his experiments. His tomato plants grew 40 feet tall and produced 15,000 tomatoes. One tomato plant. I think the whole earth was like that before the flood because they find fossils of enormous plants. Ginormous plant fossils, insect, dragonfly, 50-inch wingspan have been found. They couldn't fly today. The air is too thin. And so, and I go into about the surface area to volume ratio problem you get as an insect grows. It doesn't have enough skin to feed the body mass that it has. So I think there's overwhelming evidence because of the giant fossils of giant insects that the earth had greater air pressure. It had to, or they couldn't have lived. They couldn't have breathed. Let's see. Here's a guy raised his added CO2. Just by adding more carbon dioxide, his plant was 4.5 times bigger, just with CO2. Today, the air is 0.06% CO2. I think it was more like maybe 1% CO2, which would make plants grow like crazy. Any farmer, anybody that studies botany can tell you, oh yeah, you give more plants more CO2, they're going to grow faster. You can Google it. Rice and CO2 as greened planet Earth. Giant vegetables come off of these things. So what happens, the stomata under the leaf will open up and let more, they get actually more stomata per square inch. And this guy did, his corn stalks grew twice as tall. Maple or a black walnut tree, twice as tall. Cantaloupe as big as soccer balls. There was an article 30 years ago in Creation magazine about all this with pressure. What would happen if the plants were given what we think would be the pre-flood Garden of Eden conditions? California State Science Fair project. What do they do? Plant growth, manipulation of atmospheric pressure growth systems. By adding pressure or changing the light or adding CO2, plants go nuts. They would like to grow lots faster. And judging from, I did a debate with a woman professor from Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois, and she said there's so much coal in the world, it had to take millions of years to form all that coal. Because she said all the plants in the world today could not be squeezed into that amount of coal. There's not enough plants in the world to make the coal in the ground. I said, you're right. She said, don't you see? It took millions of years. I said, no, don't you see? The pre-flood world was very different. They had a lot more plants. 70% of our world is still underwater. What if all that was raising plants? What if the North and South Pole were covered in plants? See, the scoffers in the last days, 2 Peter said, 2 Peter 3, they're willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood. What was that creation like? Fossil trees that approach the heights of the tallest redwoods today have been found in northern Thailand. A petrified log, 237 feet long. One petrified log. Petrified fern fossils that are ginormous by today's standards. I know that's not a word. I made it up and I'm going to use it, okay? I think the canopy above the Earth would increase air pressure and had probably more CO2 and more oxygen. Today, the nitrogen just dilutes it down, 78% nitrogen, so we're not, dying of oxygen toxicity. If it was 100% oxygen, we couldn't live very long. So I think 32% is about optimal. Anyway, that's the kind of stuff I cover in the Garden of Eden in my seminar, part 2. You can get the whole hour and a half in the whole series, $50, 18 hours if you want that. So did I go too long there, brother? Sorry about that. You go ahead and ask questions.
No, that was awesome. I just had a quick question. What happened to the canopy? Was it when it broke apart during the flood? And what happened to it?
Well, I cover this in great detail on my YouTube channel, Kent Hovind Official, a couple of weeks ago. If the fountains of the deep broke open, like the Bible says, and stuff went shooting up, it would shatter this crystalline canopy, and super cold ice is magnetic. So the Earth has a magnetic field around it. The ice then would be dumped on the poles. I think there was a rapid ice age by the ice just being super cold snow from the shattered canopy being dumped on the poles. They find they find frozen mammoths standing up, frozen, with food still in their teeth. They didn't even have a chance to swallow their last bite. Undigested food in their stomach, and they're frozen solid. When I was doing research on this for my seminar, I said, I wonder how long would it take to freeze an elephant? So I called Bird's Eye Frozen Food people in New York. And I said, if I stuck an elephant in the freezer, what would happen? It was silent on the other end of the line for a minute. I'm sure they're thinking. Anyway, the guy said, well, you would have a crowded freezer. I said, yes, sir. I'm well aware of that. But how long would it take to freeze an elephant? He said, about 5 days. I said, why? He said, well, the outside would freeze and the heat would be trapped in the middle. It would take a long time to freeze to the middle. I said, well, I've got to freeze my elephant in less than 5 hours. How do I do it? They said, well, you got to cut them up in little pieces. If you ever thaw out or freeze a large turkey or something for Thanksgiving, it takes about 24 hours to freeze or thaw 12 inches. So the food in their stomach is still undigested. I mean, after an animal dies, the stomach acid doesn't know he's dead. It keeps doing its job of dissolving the food. So how do you find a mammoth frozen, standing up with undigested, fresh green food in their stomach? You got to freeze them in less than 5 hours. And so the guy said, well, if you want to freeze your elephant less than 5 hours and you can't cut them up, then you got to put them in something like liquid nitrogen, 300 below zero. Well, it never gets 300 below zero on Earth. The coldest temperature ever recorded at the South Pole was somewhere around 127 below. That's pretty chilly. But that's not cold enough to freeze the mammoth. So what happened? I think the crystalline canopy above, when it got shattered by the fountains of the deep breaking open, would snow on the poles, and it'd be a rapid dump of tiny ice crystals that would freeze things standing up, including trees frozen, standing up. So that's the Hovind theory. The ice from the crystalline canopy is probably still here, North and South Pole.
Nice. What are the biggest objections when it comes to the canopy theory when you debate against it?
Well, it makes too much sense. I've never heard them give an the biggest objection they have is, well, other scientists don't believe that.
Oh,
okay. Tell them to come see me. I'll straighten them out.
So I'll jump in here. I've got a ton of questions from the audience, and a lot of them having to do with Noah's Ark and the global flood. I've got a couple random ones here on the canopy. So I think before I move to questions specifically on like Noah's Ark, let me see. The chat's lively. They're flying by. So let me go back here. Here's one question that came in, Dr. Hovind, from Luca. He says, if the sun was above the ice, why was it not melting? Is that a question that makes sense, Dr. Hovind?
Oh, yeah, perfect sense. Is the sun above the ice in Alaska right now? Sure. I've grown up in the north in Illinois and been all over the world. And I was in New Hampshire for a year and a half, and it's cold, Berlin, New Hampshire. And you can have sunny days and it doesn't melt the ice. I think there's people all over the world will attest the fact that there are sunny days in frozen places. Siberia gets plenty of sunlight, but it stays awfully cold up there. So, yeah, I think just any earth science book would give you how weather works, would explain that. You know, it's a matter of the angle of the sun hitting the atmosphere. And there's a lot of factors tie into that. But if you get enough ice in one spot, it becomes its own refrigerator. It keeps itself cold. You can get a 100-pound block of ice, set it out on the sidewalk when it's 100 degrees. It'll take probably a couple days to melt. It'll take a long time.
Right. That's a great answer, Dr. Hovind. I do have a question here, but I don't want to dominate. Brother George, did you have anything you wanted to say before we moved on to a follow-up question?
Well, yeah. Look, we've heard some of these questions from critics before, but one that keeps coming up is when Noah sacrificed the animals after the flood, did he wipe out an entire species?
Well, that's a simple misunderstanding of what the Bible says. God told Noah to take 2 of each kind and 7 of some. So he took 7 of some of the animals, and those were the ones he sacrificed. So no, he didn't wipe out a whole species. They should read the Bible before they criticize it.
Right. I find a lot of these arguments and criticisms are coming from critics who've never actually read the Bible or the Genesis account in the first place. So they're oftentimes based on a false assumption. So that's a great answer, Kent. My specific question has to do with a common argument I hear from the critics. They'll state that, and I'm sure you've heard it numerous times as well, Kent. They'll say that Noah's Ark could not have been possible because there would be no way Noah and his family could store so much food and so much water for all of those animals. In your opinion, Kent, do you think that's a valid objection? And also, what's the best way to refute that claim?
Well, there's all kinds of things to consider in that. God told Noah how big to build the ark. There were probably about 8,000 different kinds of animals. He didn't have to bring fish on the ark. They had plenty of water outside, okay? He didn't have to bring insects because insects don't have nostrils. God told Noah to bring all those in whose nostrils was the breath of life. Some insects might have been on the ark, but insects can survive a flood just fine on floating log mats and dead carcasses, so that would not be a problem. And he didn't have to bring any water. The whole earth was fresh water. I believe Noah's Ark probably had a moon pool, a hole in the middle. Some big ships do that today. You get a really long ship, when it goes over the wave, it'll tend to bend or stress the ship and eventually break. So if you put a hole in the middle of the floor of the ship and build walls up inside, as you crest over the waves, the water goes up and down inside that, and actually does several things. It relieves the stress on a long ship by having several moon pools. It also pumps air in and out of the boat. Every time you hit a wave, it's like a big piston going up, pumping air in, and it's a source of fresh water. So I think the water is certainly a ridiculous argument. That would not be a problem. We know that the oceans are getting saltier every day. They gain salt all the time. Mineral salts wash off the ground. Evaporation takes out only the water, leaving the salt behind. I think anybody can do a study real quickly and find out today's 3.6% salt in the ocean could have come in 4,000 or 5,000 years very easily from a completely freshwater ocean. So I think Noah didn't have to bring any water. As far as food, many animals, when they become confined, become dormant. They're not eating near as much because they're not running around as much. They're more dormant. And God didn't tell them to put cages in the ark. They put rooms and probably had big piles of food because all the animals were vegetarian, according to Genesis chapter 1 and 2. It wasn't until after the flood, Genesis 9, that people became carnivorous. He said, now Noah, you can eat meat. And he said, all the animals are going to be afraid of you. So before the flood came in, during the flood, they were all vegetarian. They all could have eaten any kind of fruit or vegetables. And with the pre-flood conditions, the increased air pressure, probably there'd be no spoilage. It'd be very different without the UV light and the things that we have today that cause damage, make the food spoil more quickly. So 8,000 animals that are mostly dormant. Some sleep the whole time. If they can't run around, they go to sleep. Less activity. Plus, Noah probably brought babies of everything. They would, of course, eat a lot less. And that's just common sense to bring babies. Why wouldn't you bring babies? They're going to live longer after the flood, and that's why you're bringing them. You wouldn't bring adult babies of anything.
And babies sleep a lot.
And what now?
And babies sleep a lot.
They sleep. A lot of animals sleep when they're confined. I'd like to sleep a lot once in a while. I don't get a chance to, but babies sleep a lot. Yeah, young ones.
Well, that's why I'd love to get one of those hyperbaric oxygen chambers you were talking about, Dr. Hovind. I could sleep for 5 minutes a night, and I could do everything that I do now plus more. Here's a more lighthearted question. Came in through a super chat. Doki Doki Bible Club. Thank you so much. Question is, warm in Alabama? ?
Well, it was 65 today. That's a little chilly, but no, it's beautiful. We love it down here. Come on down.
The 3% or the 97%?
The what now?
Is Alabama the 3% or the 97%?
Of what?
Inhabitable.
Oh, Alabama is definitely the habitable part. Yeah, we love it down here. We don't need any more people, though. There's plenty. We got 35 in our town. That's enough.
Well, we're definitely going to come visit soon one of these days.
Yeah,
Rob, did you have a question, brother?
Yeah, just real quick. I still don't understand why people would have thought Noah would have brought adult old animals on the ark anyway. I mean, he would have brought something that would needed to breed and repopulate the earth, right? I mean, why would he bring elderly animals that are all old? But one of the most popular, powerful arguments against the global flood being just 4,500 years ago is the genetic bottleneck. They say that humans and other animals would have never been able to rebound so quickly. What would you say to that?
You talk about a genetic bottleneck. They believe everything came from one amoeba. Don't they?
That's right.
That came from a rock. What is the genetic bottleneck of a rock, which came from a dot of nothing exploding? What's a genetic bottleneck of nothing? It is so insane that they would pick at something like that. I think that any farmer would take. Matter of fact, I was speaking on this one time at I forget what state I was in even, but I mentioned about there are 450 breeds of dogs in the world today, and they might have come from a common ancestor called a dog. And this lady raised her hand in the Q&A time. She said, Brother Hovind, our family has been in the kennel business for 100 years. My great-grandfather started a kennel. We raise and breed special varieties of dogs. She said, I can tell you from experience, we could make every breed of dog in the world today in 100 years. You give us 50 generic dogs, go pick up 50 dogs on the street, give us anything. We will selectively breed, and in 100 years, we'll have a Chihuahua and a Great Dane. In 100 years. So most of the dogs today have been created by selective breeding. Somebody wants a cute little lap dog like a Chihuahua. Those dogs wouldn't last 2 minutes out in the woods on their own. And most of the dogs they do create with this selective breeding, you got to babysit them now. They could never go out and find their own food. They'll die if they have to do that. So I think that same with the cows. When I was in Illinois, at Kankakee, teaching up there, took my kids because somebody in Illinois that year at Kankakee had the world's record milk-producing cow. That one cow produced 100 pounds of milk a day. Utterly ridiculous. So we went to see the world record cow, 100 pounds of milk. The thing could barely walk. Okay? It could never survive in the wild. So man selectively breeds animals to get a particular trait that they like. They want more beef or more milk or, something. But in nature, they would be weeded out. So today there are 37 varieties of foxes in the world. They might have had a common ancestor called a fox. And there are 1,100 species of bats in the world, and they might have had a common ancestor called a bat. All we ever see is exactly what God said would happen. 20 times in the first 7 chapters, it says the animals are going to bring forth after their kind. And a Chihuahua and a Great Dane and a wolf are the same kind of animal. And then the dog family. Atheists will look at that and say, well, maybe there's no limit to this. Well, you can believe that if you want, but science shows us there's a limit. They've been trying to get smaller dogs for a long time. You think they'll ever get a dog as small as a hamster? There are animals as small as a hamster, like a hamster. You think they'll ever get a dog as big as an elephant? There are animals as big as an elephant too, like an elephant. So sure, we can get variations of dogs, but there are limits. And the further you get away from the normal, generic, ordinary dog, the more problems you're going to have. Most of the special breed dogs have some kind of problem like hip dysplasia or heart problems or something. They don't live as long. Or you got to babysit them. They couldn't survive for sure in the wild. Okay?
Yeah, no, I love it, Dr. Hovind. These arguments from the critics are prime examples of 2 Peter 3 and the scoffers, right? They used arguments from bottlenecks in this specific case when they themselves believe all life today, as you said, came from a single-celled like ancestor long ago and far away, which came from a rock, which ultimately came from nothing. So, yeah, perfect.
That's a bottleneck.
That's a bottleneck right there. George, if you had a question.
Because I live in Australia, I get to see some variety of plants and whatever, and there's one species of bottle brush, I think it is. The seed is so hard that it has to wait for a fire to come along for it to germinate. I mean, we've heard a lot of stories from the evolutionists about what happened to the plants during or after the global flood.
Well, Noah did not have to bring plants on the ark other than for food. And of course, whatever the animals ate, they're going to deposit in their feces when they leave. And their seeds, many seeds grow after, out of the animal feces. They don't get affected by digestion. Plus, during a flood, you get floating log mats all over the place. Put my slides back up there, would you, Steve? Here's an example of coal seams. Coal, obviously made from plants. They can make coal in the laboratory in 20 minutes. You take wood under heat and pressure, turn it to coal in 20 minutes. So why would you have layer coal, layer of sediment, layer of coal, sediment, coal, sediment, coal? Well, during the flood, you get the tide going up and down. Only with no interruptions, the tide would probably be a 200-foot tidal change, a harmonic tide they call that, if the earth were covered in water and not interrupted by continents. And the water going up and down would have to be coming up. They estimate that a harmonic tide on the earth would be about a 200-foot tidal change. Okay, well, if the water came up 200 feet here in Lenox, Alabama, where's all the water coming from to fill that bump? Sideways. It's being pulled sideways by the moon's gravity at the same speed the earth is turning. We're in Lenox, we're 31 degrees above the equator. We're turning almost 900 miles an hour toward the east. So to keep that bump of water full under the moon, the water's racing at 900 miles an hour, sideways. That's going to knock down the forests and make layers of trees. So the floating log mats would be ginormous all over the world, and insects can survive just fine on floating log mats. And many plants can survive prolonged inundation and grow right back. Some actually require some period of inundation to germinate. So I think you'll go to any flood area any place where there's been a flood, man, the next year the plants are growing like crazy because it's all fresh topsoil on top. So I think the seeds in the animal food, the seeds that floated, seeds can float for a long time and germinate when they land. Seeds that are buried, floating log mats would germinate. Look what happened at Mount St. Helens. And all over the world, petrified trees are found standing up, running through these layers. There's one harmonic tide, 200 feet, have to come up 200 feet in 6 hours, 12 and a half minutes, each tide. Each tide would make new layers. And so the floating log mass would be one simple answer for the seeds. But again, an atheist will pick on something like that little question, which they think is like an insurmountable question, and it's not. And yet they turn around, talk about swallowing and straining at a gnat and swallowing a camel. They then believe all the plants in the world came from a dot of nothing exploding. That is a special kind of stupid that needs special care.
Well,
And
go ahead, George. Go ahead.
I was just going to, Kent, we've heard a lot of explanations to the polystrate fossils. There's one example that I can think about. In Nova Scotia, I believe there are polystrate fossils of reeds, giant reeds. Now, how do they explain the polystrate fossils where the actual fossil is a reed? They tell you that
reeds are tender.
Yeah.
They wouldn't last long. They have to be buried quickly before it had a chance to decay. Reeds wouldn't last long at all. Yeah.
Exactly. And because I live in a very, well, it's considered the driest continent in the world, Australia. How do you explain the existence of deserts in the context of the global flood?
Well, the deserts formed after the flood. If you watch my video number 1, where I talk about the age of the earth, I show the Sahara Desert. All the articles are saying the Sahara Desert is probably about 4,000 years old because it's growing. It's a process called desertification. The Sahara Desert is growing. It's 1,300 miles north to south. And at the rate it's growing, compared to the size of the desert, they say, wow, it's about 4,000 years old. I would agree. When Noah got off the ark, the whole world had been covered in water. Stuff began to grow, but because of what's called the prevailing wind patterns, things that happen because of the Coriolis effect of the earth and the prevailing wind patterns at different latitudes and things, you get some areas where the wind always blows the same way. Here in Lenox, Alabama, it generally comes out of the southwest. Okay, you probably have a prevailing wind pattern where you are too, and the Coriolis effect. So I think the deserts would begin to form after the flood, and that's why the biggest desert in the world. I can call up the data on it here. Let's see. Alt F open, seminar part 1. Here we go. The deserts would begin to grow after the floodwater went down. So I asked the atheists, I say, guys, if the earth is billions of years old, why don't we have a desert that's older than 4,000? Because the flood was 4,400 years ago, according to the Bible. Let's see if I can find it here. Anyway, go ahead. Next question. I'll try to find the slide proving what I just said.
That's a good point right there. Actually, before I get to the next question, based on some of the things you were talking about, especially the lines of evidence with the flood, I noticed that the scoffers on their own channels, when they're with their own atheist pals, they'll scoff. One debate that comes to mind, Dr. Hovind, is Professor Dave. I believe you forced him into early retirement. He'll never recover from that. And he attempted to go at it with you on the flood. And within 10 minutes, you were providing evidence after evidence, and he wanted to get off that subject so fast. I was laughing in my seat. So I wanted to point out that, when you get them into a live debate, suddenly they're not so confident, are they, Dr. Hovind?
Well, he still thinks he won that debate. I am baffled. He apparently didn't watch it himself. Okay, he still will brag. Oh, how bad he slaughtered Hovind. Well, Dave, bring it on anytime. I'll take you and all. I'll challenge all the atheists you can get together in one room at the same time. If I get half the time, we talk about one topic at a time and no interrupting. Shut their mic off when it's my turn to talk. They can shut mine off when it's their turn to talk. I want them to present the best 3 evidences they know of for evolution. And by that, I mean macroevolution. They'll give examples of, 3 different colors of squirrels coming from a common ancestor. Okay, it's still a squirrel, guys. Okay, a squirrel. It doesn't prove mosquitoes are related to whales. So all they do is give examples of what anybody would call variations or microevolution. It's still the same kind of animal. God said 10 times in the creation story, they would bring forth after their kind. And then they'll try to divert the topic and say, well, what exactly is a kind? And I say, well, can you define exactly what's a species? Are dogs and wolves different species? Yeah. Can they interbreed? Yeah. So exactly what's a species? It doesn't matter. A 4-year-old can tell you a dog and a wolf are the same kind and do not belong in the duck family.
Like I should get to a couple of these super chats real quick because everybody's enjoying this. We got a great audience today. A lot of people throwing questions. So a couple super chats here. Here's a specific one from SOD, $5 super chat. Thank you so much. Right here seems to be an evolutionist argument. He says after their kind is just charitably the law of monophily, which as we know is. They'll say, R and Ra will say that we can't outgrow our ancestry. He says it does not disprove evolution. And Dr. Hovind, you're quite familiar with this argument where, you'll point out dogs produce dogs and they'll say that's what evolution expects. But then you'll ask them, do you believe a dog came from something non-dog long ago and far away? And that's where they point out, well, that was millions of years ago. How do you respond to that, Dr. Hovind?
Well, if we can't outgrow our ancestors, but we all came from a single-celled amoeba, did the amoeba outgrow into something else? Apparently, we did outgrow our ancestors because we have more than one cell.
Right.
Don't they teach we all came from a single-celled creature? An average human has 100 trillion cells in their body. I think we outgrew our ancestors.
And Kent, they all point to this last universal common ancestor, but they can never tell you what it is. But it supposedly gave rise to the archaea, the bacteria, and the eukaryote. Well, those three domains of life are three different clades. So that defeats the phylogenetic tree in itself.
Well, what they do in the textbooks for the kids, they put humans, monkeys, all the different animals and plants, and they draw lines between all of them. Well, the fact that they drew a line that's enough evidence for them. Hey, we got a line, that proves it. I could draw a line between a human and a car. Would that prove they're related? No. All they do, it's pure propaganda is what it is. And to me, it's absolutely insane to believe that nobody's ever observed a dog produce a non-dog. Never. And so guys like Aaron Nelson, who calls himself Aaron Ra, the sun god, I say to be a son, you'd have to be, bright. But anyway, sure doesn't qualify for that. But and I won't debate him publicly together because he'll interrupt all the time unless I got control of somebody has control of his microphone. But if he won't interrupt, sure, I'll take him on again. So we can't outgrow our ancestors. That's all evolution teaches, is that everybody did outgrow their ancestors. It's completely bizarre, insane, I think. They need a psychiatric evaluation.
That's good. Yeah, no, that's a great answer, Dr. Hovind. Here's another super chat that came in. Doki Doki Bible Club, thank you so much, $5. Doki says, Hugh Ross, who you've debated before, Kent, says nature is an extra book of the Bible and imagines evolutionary story. Why so many Christians share this view, in your opinion? I guess referring to Hugh Ross's view. Day Age, I believe it is.
Yeah, Hugh Ross is a Catholic who believes that the earth is billions of years old and we have to somehow make the Bible say evolution. Well, the Bible says very clearly nothing died until Adam sinned. Man brought death into the world. Evolution says, oh no, death brought man into the world. Billions of years of death and suffering and struggle for life, and finally we made it, we're here. Total opposite to what the Bible says. God made a perfect world, man wrecked it. And death and suffering are here because of man's sin. Whereas in Hugh Ross's view, death and suffering and struggle for life is how we got here. It's a wonderful thing that everybody dies. I mean, in evolution theory, you got a whole bunch of animals. Let's take a herd of cows, okay? One cow evolves a little better than the rest. For some reason, some genetic mistake or something happens. This cow is now a super cow. What has happened to the rest of them? Well, for this to work, they all got to die so the super cow can now take over the world. But of course, if you get one cow evolving a little better than the rest, you really have to have two, male and female, in the same time in history at the same place. And they got to find each other. So they got a whole lot of problems. But they do strongly teach that animals do somehow change to something else. It's just simply never observed. It's not science. That's why I've said for years, evolution is a religion, nothing more than a religion. And if they want to believe it, that's fine. I don't care what they believe. But they want to make all of us pay to have their religion taught in the schools. Now that we got a problem with. they want to go start a private school and teach the kids you all come from a rock, okay, go teach it.
For
They
sure.
could even have their own theme songs, Rock of Ages, if they want. But
Yeah.
they shouldn't have taxpayers pay for that dumb religion to be taught.
What do you think about the flood and the Caribbean islands? Does the flood explain their existence, or do you know if in that model?
Well, here's the Hovind theory on that. All over the world, almost all of the continents that we see and the islands have continental shelf. There's a beach. You can walk out quite a ways, and all of a sudden it drops off into the deep part. Off of Florida, you can, let's see, Florida, you can go out about 300 miles and before it gets 100 feet deep. And then all of a sudden it drops off into what's called the abyss. The oceans have two distinct parts, the depth, the deep part, and the continental shelf. Right now, if you lowered the oceans 100 feet, and they average 12,000 feet deep, if you could lower the oceans 100 feet, you could walk anywhere in the world. The land bridge between Alaska and Russia, most of that water in there is only 60 feet deep. And, it's 60 miles wide, but only 60 feet deep. The English Channel between England and France, it's only about 100 feet deep. From here to the shop, 100 feet. That's it. So I think right after the flood, when Noah got off the ark, the ice caps were bigger, making the oceans smaller. It would take a few hundred years for that ice to melt back, which as the ice melts back, it's going to raise the ocean level, like duh. So I think the Caribbean islands were probably part of the mainland of the United States, or maybe South America. I'm not sure where they would fit in if you lowered down to the continental shelf. Go to Google Maps and get the satellite view. You can see the shallow water around England for 100 miles off the coast. You can still see it from the satellite. The depth, it's not that deep. So the Caribbean would be probably part of South America. I think as the ice melted back, the Atlantic Ocean would fill in and then finally spill over and fill up the Gulf of Mexico, maybe 50 years after the flood. There's no question there's ice came all the way down to Kansas City, Missouri. I mean, there was an ice age, but I think it happened simultaneous with the flood. I covered that a couple of weeks ago on our channel, Kent Hovind Official. If you want to go there and watch that with all my slides and stuff, I got about 20,000 slides. So it take me a while to find them. So I won't get them now for the program. Okay.
Well, I appreciate that response, Kent. That was a really good response. I've got a question here that can sum up probably about 20 different questions that came in. So I'll sum it up with this one question. Kent, with the critics of young Earth creationists, they'll often say that the fossil record is a reflection of large-scale evolution from more simple organisms to what we have today. In other words, the critics say the global flood itself could not explain the ordering of the fossil record, right? They say the global flood should have mixed everything up, essentially. What is the best way to address this claim, Dr. Hovind?
Well, first place, young Earth, 6,000 is not young. That's a long time. It's hard to think about Abe Lincoln, 150 years ago, or Columbus 500 years ago. 6,000 is a long time. So that's plenty of time to account for everything, especially when you consider the flood. As far as the fossil record, I say there's no such thing as a fossil record. No such thing. There are fossils. We got thousands of them here in Dinosaur Adventureland. When you find a fossil like this petrified clam, you should notice a couple things about it right away. Number one, it does not talk. Number two, it does not have a date stamped on it. It doesn't say made by a clam in 80 million BC. It doesn't say that. So somebody's putting their interpretation on the clam. It's also interesting, there are millions of petrified clams in the closed position. Whoa, whoa, whoa. When clams die, they open. How do you get petrified clams closed on top of Mount Everest, tallest mountain in the world? So there's no such thing as a fossil record. It doesn't exist. As far as the order of the fossils, it is generally true that reptiles are found in the same layer. Not always. Generally. What does that mean? Could it mean that reptiles have a similar body density? And of course, in a flood, they're going to float in the same layer. They say clams are usually found at the bottom of the geologic column. Okay. They'll say, see, that proves clams evolved first. I say, no, guys, clams are already at the bottom when the flood starts. That's where they live. They're the first ones buried. They say, well, birds are found last on the top layer. That proves they evolved last. No, Birds are the last ones buried in the flood. They fly around till they run out of gas. And they got hollow feathers and hollow bones. Of course they're found on top. Of course they're found in the same layer. Clams might be found at the bottom because they're already at the bottom. That's where they live. They're the first ones buried. Maybe because they're not too smart. They see things changing around them. They clam up and hope things get better. Okay. Maybe because their body density. Clams are a little heavier than birds, pound, per square inch density. Maybe because they can't run quite as fast as a bird can fly. I don't know. But the sorting of the fossils is not as clear as they would like you to believe it is. All kinds of anomalies happen. And if you find a bird in what they consider the wrong layer, they've got 20 different excuses they can turn to in their book of how this happened. It was an insertion. There was a crack, a fault line, and it fell down in. They got a whole bunch of exceptions to that. If you watch, there's a video. It's fabulous, but it's kind of boring speaker. I feel bad about that. It's called Experiments in Stratification. At the Navy, at the laboratory in Colorado, they dump sediments into this tank that's like 30 feet long while the water's flowing. As they pour the sediments in, it forms 8 or 10 layers at the same time. The layers form horizontally, not vertically. If the layers are forming horizontally, you can have a fossil on top that's actually older than a fossil at the bottom that was deposited earlier. Watch the video, Experiments in Stratification, if you can tolerate the, come on, speed it up, guys, But it's really good material. Just needs to be we're going to build a flume tank like that here at Dinosaur Adventureland, where we can show that the layers do not form. They tell the kids in school the top layer is younger. I say, really? Where did it come from? Outer space? What do you mean the layer is younger? No, all the layers are the same age. Get a jar of dirt, sand, rocks, gravel. We do this here a couple times a day when we give the tour, and water, and we shake it up and set it down. And in 2 minutes, it settles into gravel, sand, clay. Always gravel, sand, clay. Okay. Noah's flood, each tide would make gravel, sand, clay. Our gravel pit, I'm in the middle of a gravel pit, Lennox. That's what it was for years before it became Dinosaur Adventureland, a gravel pit. Perfect. It has 7 layers of gravel, sand, clay, gravel, sand, clay. The layers we have here go all the way to North Carolina, all the way to North Tennessee, and all the way to South Florida. This was a huge gravel, seams of gravel. And the gravel all over the world is rounded. Well, now hold it. They call it river rock. Oh, no, this is flood rock. This was tumbled around during Noah's flood. If the water came up 200 feet in Lennox and came rushing in at 900 miles an hour, every tidal change, it would roll the rocks back and forth and round them off. This is from the flood. So there is no fossil record. There are lots of fossils, but each tide would make a different set of layers. And so Noah was in the ark floating for 880 tidal changes. Then the ark hit bottom, and it took months for the ground to dry out because the water still sloshing back and forth, and the crust of the earth was unstable. It's still unstable. The crust of the earth is still busted up. There's fault lines all over the place. The San Andreas Fault, the Hayward Fault, the New Madrid Fault. None of them are my fault, but there are faults all over the earth, and the earth's crust is still moving, and sometimes there's earthquakes and volcanoes, and those cracks are probably where the fountains of the deep broke open and the water came out. Right during the flood and right after the flood, the crust would be even more unstable. As the water under the crust is escaping, there'd be a fluid effect that would allow it to slide. That's why you get wrinkled mountains. The mountains slid in and wrinkled up, and you get wrinkled mountains in various places, sideways movement of the crust. So I think my video series covers that in seminar part 6 about the flood. What did that do anyway? Where'd the water come from, and where'd it go? And what did it do while it was here? Oh, that's classic. And the Bible says the scoffers will be ignorant of the creation and the flood. I got a picture. We're not up here on screen, are we? Okay. Tidal change in Bay of Fundy, Canada, goes up and down 50 or 60 feet. So the tides going up and down and rushing in and out to fill that bump would cause all the strata that we find. There is no fossil record. The animals that are sorted, maybe maybe the herds of elephants died at the same time because they're all together. Maybe there's no people found with the elephant herd because people don't normally hang out in the middle of elephant herds. Maybe that's why there's no humans found in there, Like, duh. Are they that dumb? Go ahead, brother.
Kent, as an engineer, I've watched quite a few flume experiments, and they're not boring, mate. They're not boring, really.
Oh, the
Come on,
experiment is great, but the guy teaching it is anyway.
Okay, look, this has got something to do with it, by the way. We keep hearing this objection a number of times. They find egg nests sandwiched between layers laid down by the same flood. How do you explain the egg nests? And I believe some of the photos that I've seen, when the dinosaurs lay their eggs, they lay them in a specific pattern. And their objection is a flood would disrupt that pattern and move them around. So why do we find those egg nests in that pattern?
Well, I think you'd find even today all over the world, there are a wide range of water movements all the way from nothing to violent movement. So there might have been some times during Noah's flood when the water was not moving around violently, and other times when it was. If there was a chunk of the earth the size of Texas or the size of Australia, and it's got fault lines around it, it's a broken plate, like a piece of broken eggshell. The water is going to deposit sediments. Toward the end of the flood, that thing might tilt or shift, half a mile or kilometer for you folks. Well, if it was covered by a mile of water and it tilted, this is now going to become mountain range, and the water's going to rush off, and this is going to be ocean. It's interesting to look. Nearly all the mountain ranges in the world follow the coastlines. Whoa, whoa, whoa. The Rocky Mountains follow the Pacific. The Appalachian Mountains follow the Atlantic, North Atlantic. The Alps, or the Andes Mountains, follow the South Pacific. I don't know what the name of your mountain range in Australia is, I forgot, but along the coastal range, do they call that? What do they call that one on the East Coast? Yeah. Why is it parallel with
the Great Dividing Range? But further to what you just said, I know a bit about liquefaction. You've probably heard of liquefaction.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, my theory is, based on what you said, the water's going up and down. If nature calls, the dinosaur will lay their eggs. Through the catastrophic process that we all know about, volcanic actions, earthquake, etc., liquefaction could literally vibrate those layers and literally sink the eggs in that formation and then get reburied by the new water that flows over the top of it. So that's been my explanation to it. Liquefaction can explain it.
Liquefaction is an amazing process. If the ground shakes in an earthquake, the water comes to the surface and buildings will sink right in. I got pictures in my seminar, giant buildings, especially in Japan where they get earthquakes all the time. The whole building just sinks into the ground.
Yep.
Because of liquefaction. Just Google that. It's amazing phenomena that happens. I think during Noah's flood, that would be all over the world.
Matt, do you have a question?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the critics say that the fossilized coral reefs are a problem for the flood model. Is that true?
Fossil coral reefs? Now hold it. You're somebody who believes all the coral in the world fit in a dot smaller than a period, smaller than a proton. They're complaining about what? All the coral in the world came from a dot smaller than a billion times smaller than a proton. Anyway, so no, fossilized coral, during the flood in the days of Noah, the whole earth would be upset. Under the right conditions, coral can grow really fast. It depends upon the sunlight, the amount of minerals in the water that it needs, and the food supply, etc. But there have been some really rapid coral growth. So I think in the pre-flood world, there were probably large lakes or seas, but no oceans like we have today. God designed the earth to be inhabited. That's what he said so, Isaiah 45. He created it to be inhabited. Well, today, only 3% of the world is habitable. The rest is underwater or deserts or ice caps. So apparently something changed. If only 3% is habitable and God made it to be inhabited. So I don't know what the coral was like before the flood, and we've got some fossil coral here in our museum. But I guess I'd have to put that as coral growth would be phenomenal because of the greater air pressure, getting more gases diffused into the water for how many different types of coral are there? Thousands probably. So I'm not sure what their objection is, but anybody who believes they came from a dot of nothing for no reason, I'm a little reluctant to give any questions they ask any credence, you know.
Makes sense.
And we've got, of course, we've always heard, what about the fossil rabbit in the Precambrian? Why don't we find those fossils, and why can't we find humans and dinosaurs together in the fossil record? I know what you think about records, but they're the questions that they put forward.
Well, first of all, how do we know they haven't found these fossils together? Who's doing the counting? Because if you did find one and tried to publish a paper on it, they wouldn't publish it because it doesn't fit their preconceived idea. Secondly, there is overwhelming evidence of dinosaurs and humans living together. My video number 3 of my series is all about dinosaurs living with man. All through history, they called them dragons, called Dinosaurs and the Bible. They can get that with the seminar. We have a whole section of our museum here showing tons of evidence of humans and dinosaurs living together. A friend of mine called me. He said, Brother Hovind, I was a missionary in the Congo, Africa for 42 years, right near the equator. He said, I had pygmies in my church that killed and ate an apatosaurus. They described it, they called it a dragon or something like that, Mokele Mbembe. They said it was disturbing their fishing holes. So they put stakes across the river to keep it out of their fishing holes, and it got caught and tangled up in the stakes, and they went out there and killed it and ate it. When he showed them a picture of an apatosaurus, you know, like a brontosaurus, they said, yeah, that's Mokele Mbembe. That's what we ate.
Man.
Still
George,
alive.
you need to find those people and see if it tasted like chicken.
I
Prove your theory.
Now, can't you've probably heard of the Ashley phosphate beds and Professor Holmes?
Huh?
I'm surprised that whenever I bring that up, all they do is deny, dismiss, and reject this. I mean, I always pond this conundrum to them. The fossils that were found in that phosphate bed represent hundreds of millions of years of geological history. I always ask, how do you represent hundreds of millions of years of geology in 18 inches? They can't answer that.
Yeah, what do they say?
It. Well, if you've seen some of them, they say, invisible layers. No, the mining activity mixed all these fossils together. I said, no, but it was all found in like under about 20 feet of strata in an 18-inch bed layer. They don't like the Ashley phosphate beds. They run away from it.
Right. Well, there are some places in the world where the number of fossils per square meter is mind-boggling. The Karoo Formation is another one in Africa. There are 800 million vertebrate animals, I mean animals with a backbone, in one big formation. Well, you'd almost think there was a flood if you didn't know better.
Well, 2 Peter 3 says that the global flood being one of those events in history that they would deny. Dr. Hovind, before we end our time with you here, and as always, I appreciate you being so generous with your time. I've had this same question come in probably 5 or 6 times, just worded differently. So I think I should probably put it on screen and ask it. So their question is essentially, chimpanzees, humans, gorillas, for example, they say that they share genetic mistakes. They have some of the same defects at the same location in the DNA code. Sometimes they'll point to the gulo pseudogene, where it has to do with vitamin C synthesis, the fact that we can't synthesize vitamin C, neither can the chimpanzees. So this question has come up from some of the skeptics, thinking that this is good evidence for evolution. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on that, Dr. Hovind.
Well, the DNA code, to start with, is mind-boggling in its complexity. Anybody that thinks the DNA code happened by chance really needs their head examined. It's a four-dimensional code, but the DNA code is off the charts. Our human code is, the Morse code, the codes that we make, like Morse code or our 26-letter alphabet and a code to write in, is primitive compared to the DNA code. And they think it happened by chance. So the fact that certain animals have similar problems in the same area of their DNA code. First of all, I'd like to know who's counting that, who's looking for that, and why they say that. But I'd like to have them demonstrate their point. They need to prove that. But if there are similar damage spots in different DNA codes from different animals, what would that prove? A relationship between the animals? Is that what they're saying? In any court of law, they'd laugh at that. They could have gone through the similar trauma, like maybe the worldwide flood caused something. Maybe all of a sudden a deprivation of loss of oxygen would cause a defect in that. There are a lot of things that can cause damage to the DNA code. Ask any mother that's pregnant. You got to be very careful about getting x-rayed because you're going to damage the baby or damage the DNA code. So I think that's the fact that they're claiming there are similar defects on the same part of the gene. I'd like to have that proven, first of all. But even if they could prove it, they still wouldn't prove their point that they were related somehow. I think you'll find quite a few cars have dents all over the hood after a hailstorm. If you have a hailstorm come through and your car's all dented and the neighbor's car's all dented, that proves the cars are related. No, they both went through the same tragedy called a hailstorm. So I'd really have to question, first of all, the validity of what they're saying, and then certainly question the conclusion they get from that. Even if it is true, that's still not the right conclusion.
Right. That's a great response. I've seen you point out in a debate that we hosted with you, Dr. Hovind, you pointed out to the evolutionists you were debating. You said, just because the air conditioner in my Honda Civic and my Chevy Cruze broke in the exact same way in the exact same spot doesn't mean that they evolved from a skateboard billions of years ago,
Right.
So, so shared defects doesn't prove that, humans and chimpanzees are related. I apologize, Matt. You're about to say something, brother?
Well, similar genes, a lot of things run in the genes, the genetic code. Diarrhea runs in your genes. So it is, that's like saying you have two books that have 20 million letters in them and you found the same typo in the same spot. Okay. There's 20 million letters in the book. Come on. This is ridiculous. I think the code is too, therefore nobody wrote the code. Is that what they're saying? Therefore, nobody wrote the DNA code. I mean, I don't think I can help a person like that.
It just shows how desperate they are to believe that, as you say, whales and pine trees are related, so desperate to reject our creator, that creator being the God of the Bible. So
well, I think that's one point I'd like to make if we're closing here, that the whole purpose of evolution is to find some way to psychologically reject the creator. When I spoke at Berkeley University, nobody would debate me at Berkeley. They asked 164 professors, one-on-one, would you debate Kent Hovind? They all refused. So the students who were doing this passed out flyers, come here, Kent Hovind, speak. The following professors refused to debate him, and listed a bunch of names on there. So I spoke for about an hour on creation. Afterwards, I'm out at my table where my videos were, people buying my books and stuff. And this big old football player from Berkeley came out. He was just shaking. He was so angry. He said, evolution is a fact. I said, well, calm down, son. Let me ask you a question. Suppose what I said tonight was true, that God made the world, and you chose to believe that God made the world. Would that change your lifestyle any? He said, man, that would change everything. I said, okay. Do you believe in evolution because you really have some evidence, or because you like the freedom it gives you from God? He said, I believe in evolution because I'm horny. I said, every male of every species, from termites to whales, understands that one. But there's not a reason to reject God. I mean, hello. If there's a God, then find out what he said and do it. He owns it. It's a simple, it can't be more simple. There's a God. He created it. And it's common sense. If God created us, he would write a book of some kind to tell us, what do you want? And I think it's his job not only to write the book, but to preserve it so I can read it. And I think he did that with the Bible in the King James Version. Actually, I take it a step further than some and say, I think that's where it's preserved, letter for letter. That's it. That's God's word. But if there's a God, it'll change your lifestyle. You have to say, okay, God, what do you want? And you read the book and he says, this is how you do it. You say, well, I don't like that. Okay, well, you want to do it God's way or not? He told you what to do. He tells you how to be a good husband, how to be a good wife, children obey your parents. I mean, there's verses in the Bible that for just about every topic, and just read it and do what it says. It'll work.
Kent, one of the evidence as we present for a young Earth is the mega sequences that are laid across all the continents, and we bring up specifically the limestone layer that extends from really England through Europe, the Middle East, America, and even Australia. But they then come back and they say, well, how do you explain the existence of all the Earth's limestone? There's so much limestone. Because they point to how limestone is formed, and they say you can't get that much limestone in that short a period. And we've got explanations to that, but I'm just curious as to what your response to that argument would be.
I've never been asked that question. I have to go back and do more research. It's been years since I taught on the limestone formation. But changing temperature, changing conditions in the water, I would think if the fountains of the deep broke open and it was hot water coming up into the ocean, the temperature change would be phenomenal. Right within 50 or 100 miles of the fault lines, you would get rapid death of everything, snowing to the bottom. Like the diatomaceous earth layers in California, they're hundreds of miles long and 100 feet thick. And diatoms are super tiny little microscopic critters in the water. They all died at the same time. What happened? Well, a thermal shock would do that, which would certainly happen from the fountains of the deep breaking open. Hot water shooting into the ocean. If I take a big aquarium and pour a gallon of boiling water in one end, it'll kill all the fish within a certain distance, and then pretty soon they can tolerate it. But you would get a rapid die-off within that region of the boiling water coming in. And so I think the same thing would happen with the fountains of the deep breaking open. You would get limestone and various other things that are obviously made of tiny microscopic creatures forming very rapidly. If the pre-flood world had a fruiting capacity much greater than today, you would get many more creatures living per square inch or cubic inch of water than you do today, because of just greater fruiting capacity and greater perfect living conditions for everything. So like the coal in the ground, there's a lot of coal, more coal in the earth than you could make if you did all the trees today. Every tree and bush and blade of grass in the world wouldn't make all the coal down there. I agree.
We also
go ahead.
We also spoke to John McKay about I think maybe a month or so ago, and I spoke to him personally when he came to visit his family here in Australia. And we also spoke to Bob Banyard and Brian Nicol, who you might know from your Wild Brown days. They also say that limestone can be a chemical process. They have observed limestone formation during volcano eruptions. And they say that the majority of the limestone was actually a chemical process during the flood.
Just calcium carbonate, or what are they saying? Different chemicals combining. So it's not from living organisms. Is that what they're saying?
Yes, calcium carbonate. Yeah.
Well, many organisms in the sea have to take the calcium and make their own calcium carbonate for their shells, and their body structure is made up of that. So some limestone may be from. I was just reading a couple months ago about the chalk cliffs of Dover, and the different types of chalk that they have. And I don't know. I have to do some more reading on that, but I don't see a problem. I know the Bible says the scoffers are ignorant of the flood, and the flood answers so much. The rapid temperature change within 50 miles of these cracks would kill all that stuff. But the chemical reaction one, you probably have to ask the folks like at ICR or Henry Morris or those the group that he started. They would have.
I call those shooting yourself in the foot questions, because by the same token, we find fossils buried in limestone, and according to their deposition rates, limestone forms at 1 to 2 centimeters per 1,000 years. So how can you fossilize, say, a huge creature at those kind of rates?
It had to lay there for thousands of years and slowly get fossilized.
Yeah.
Well, it's like you point out, Kent, those fossils of fish being eaten and fish giving birth. I guess the birthing process took millions and millions of years. So
they believe it. That's why I say evolution. You have to have a special kind of stupid to believe that. I just have a hard time understanding how anybody with one eye and half a brain can believe such a dumb idea? Everything came from nothing. One guy said just today in the program I was listening into that it wasn't a big bang, it was a rapid expansion.
Right.
Where it went from the size of a dot to billions of light years across instantly. So the matter is being accelerated faster than the speed of light. It's hard enough to get light to go the speed of light, and now you want to get matter to go thousands of times faster than the speed of light? And they don't see a problem with that.
No,
I don't understand.
Willingly ignorant. Well, I want to point out, Dr. Hovind, that we had you booked for an hour, and we're almost at an hour and a half mark. So as I always say, thanks so much for your generosity in giving us your time. We've had a great chat today, roughly 70 people with probably about 1,000 more questions. So we could probably do this for 10 hours. We'll start winding it down because I know how busy you are. I want to get to at least this last question because it is a super chat for $10. And then I think we'll call it a night because, like I said, you've been so generous with your time. The questioner in the super chat asks if there were baby Leviathan on the ark, in your opinion.
Well, Noah took everything on the ark that was on dry land and had nostrils. It says all those in whose nostrils. So I believe Leviathan, mentioned several times in the Bible, might have been a creature in the sea. So if it was a sea-dwelling creature, it would not need to go on the ark. There are some air-breathing sea-dwelling creatures like porpoises and dolphins, and whales. The fact that they breathe air doesn't mean they have to go on the ark. They have to be land-dwelling, all those on land, in whose nostrils is the breath of life. So the best theory I have on that is that Leviathan is probably something like a T-Rex, which might have been a water-dwelling creature or something like that. We'll have to wait and see.
Amen. Amen. Thank you for answering that last question. And like I said, I want to thank the audience as well for so many good questions, super stickers, super chats. I want to thank Matt and George as well. Matt, George, did you guys have any final words, final comments before I think we shut it down for the night?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Dr. Hovind, when he was in Australia, did you ever try cooked galah?
There are quite a few of your foods over there I did not try. I didn't understand I couldn't understand what they were saying.
Well,
and I sure didn't like the look of it or smell of it. So
I'll tell you where I'm going with this. There is a process of cooking the galah. Okay, an Aboriginal told me this. What you got to do, obviously, you got to kill the galah and defeather it, remove all the feathers. You have to cook. You have to heat up the stone so hot that it's almost glowing. You put the galah on top of that rock, and after about 5 minutes, you flip it over. Once the galah is cooked, he says you throw the galah away and you eat the rock.
Okay.
So good thing you didn't try any.
Sorry.
Well, that's why we pay you the big bucks, George. You're the comedian of the team, so I appreciate that. And Brother Matt, any final words, comments?
Oh yeah, thanks for posting Matt Powell's movie on the atheist religion. That was a good one. He came over, and unfortunately, he lost a lot of your content. I heard didn't back it up on his computer, so that's why you weren't in it. Bummer. But thanks for putting that on your channel. That was great.
All right.
And Dr. Hovind, once again, thanks so much for joining us. God bless you as always. Any final words, comments?
Well, yeah, bring everybody down to Dinosaur Adventureland in Lenox, Alabama. Go to drdino.com or call us 855-BIG-DINO. I'm extension 3. Take calls all day long and half the night. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you so much. God bless you, and God bless everybody in the...
I hope you enjoyed this video. Please make sure to hit that like button. It really does help. And subscribe if you enjoyed the content and want to see more and find more of us on our new website. This is Matt Man. Until next time.